right.
All right.
Welcome, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
This is going to be a very spooktacular Movie Boners. Very special episode.
It's the most spectacular season of the year. I tried to make the song again, but I fucked that up. Welcome to the show, everyone. Woohoo!
It's a good time. Before we get into the episode and all of the homework we have to tell you about, what beer are you drinking today?
Well, this one is relevant if you know me well enough, I guess you could say. So it's not a spooky beer per se. It is an Oktoberfest style. But if you know me and how I feel about horror films in general, I find them relaxing. I find them a little cozy. So I'm drinking, it's from Three Nations Brewing down here in Texas. It's called Cozy Bavarian Oktoberfest.
Okay. That's totally relevant.
I know. It's not
personal
spooky,
touch.
But, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about you, good
mine? Sir? Well, because for most of these movies, maybe even all of these movies, it's not uncommon for your entrails to become your extrails, as they say. So I went with the Rails End Brewing Company from, where are they from? Hold on. Broomfield, Colorado. I never had this before, trying a new one. But it's relevant because it is a blood orange 2 times IPA. So twice the blood, twice the IPA. It's very gory. It's got a little eagle thing stabbing, piercing some blood orange. So
I like it.
He's doing the psycho motion for those of you not watching the video. It's not a creaky door in the background.
Or is it ghosties?
Yeah, could be. All right, so a couple of things to talk about. We have a couple of guest episodes coming up. So right after this episode drops, the Saturday after this episode releases, we will be on the Film versus Film podcast. It's available October 21st. Because Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's movie, is coming out, he invited us on to essentially put a Martin Scorsese movie up against his choice of Martin Scorsese movie. We chose The Departed, and he chose Taxi Driver, which I've actually never seen. And
really?
It's one I've been meaning to get around to. So that is a very fun time. Excited for you to hear that one when that comes out.
Yeah, that should be a lot of fun.
And then a couple of days after that, we have another guest episode coming out that Monday after on the 23rd with the B Critics podcast. And they are also very fun and very cool. We are doing an episode on The Final Girls, which is one of my wife's comfort movies that she just puts on all the time. So it's a very fun.
Which makes sense because it's a very joyful little movie that no one's heard of, but they should have.
Slasher homage, kind of.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah,
so check those out. Those are basically bonus.
This should be a good time.
Bonus boners episodes. It should be a very good time. And then the next episode after this one, an official movie boners episode, comes out the Sunday before Halloween, and so we are focusing on John Carpenter, the legend. But specifically his triple threat movies. So there are a lot of movies that he wrote and directed and composed the music for. We'll be talking about all of those.
John Carpenter. I have much respect for that man, as you will find out tonight or today, whenever you're listening or watching this. So
right now. And then also a little fun thing to look forward to on that episode, the John Carpenter episode, we have an interview segment on there with another filmmaker who has recently put out his first horror film. Could be the next John Carpenter. We don't know. So he did everything for his movie, started it, wrote it, directed it. And it was a fun time talking to him. So that will be playing during next episode. So check that out.
That was a good time chatting about movies with him and his movie. I very much
Yeah,
enjoyed that.
as did
All
I.
right.
The one thing I don't really enjoy, though, is the movie draft. So
Well, that's a first.
it's getting uncomfortably close. Um, the
Whoa.
problem here, the problem here is that I've had two major dives recently. Um,
Mhm.
Expendables 4, shit the bed, and then
Yeah, it did.
also Exorcist Believer is as good as everybody thought it was going to be, which is not at all good. The creator, the creator is good, but also not getting the box office I thought it would, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's basically tied with Saw X at this point, which is better than expected. Um, and then what everybody really wants to know, though, is how huge is Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie? And the answer is bigger than both Saw X and the creator.
Bigger than I anticipated. I looked at like, oh, I wonder what's that like number one at the box office, and it's Paw Patrol, and I was like, what? That's
Yeah.
what?
They weren't joking when they called it the Mighty Movie. It is a
It's
mighty, mighty
it's
movie.
it's doing a number out there. That's for sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, with Exorcist coming out, which I knew was going to be bad, even though I drafted it, I only have two more movies this year, which are Trolls 3 and The Color Purple.
Oh, I forgot
And
about The Color Purple.
yeah, it comes out on Christmas, so I only have a week of box office for that. So right
Good.
now, I'm 9 thousandths of a point ahead in the IMDb rating
All
and
right.
383 million in the box office.
All
So
right.
that is not great considering you have
Oh
a.
no.
What do you mean? Oh no,
I'm fine with how these results are starting to trickle
no,
in.
no. I
Um,
don't. I don't appreciate it, especially with the Marvels coming out,
I
a
mean,
Marvel movie, the fucking Hunger Games prequel coming out. I don't
you
know if
have
people will
talked a
like.
lot of shit this year, my friend. So
I mean, we'll see what
we'll
happens.
see. We'll see.
There
Knowing
might
my
be.
trend, every one of my picks coming up are all going to tank and just be the absolute worst way to conclude a year.
Yeah.
Uh, so you might have a shot still.
And there might be a movie in the wings that just rushes in at the last minute with a steel chair. Hopefully, I hope that will
Shut the
happen.
fuck up. No,
That
it
would be
won't.
nice. You don't know.
All
So yeah, that's where
right.
we're at with that.
All right.
It's
Well,
getting
what
close.
what new movies or new things have you been watching?
Um, I've watched almost all of Love Is Blind on Netflix, which is a reality dating show. This is a guilty pleasure of mine.
That's it
um,
had been a while since you've brought that show up, and
it's been a while since they released new episodes, but here we are. But in all seriousness, though, I know I watched something, but I actually didn't write it down. I was gonna say I didn't watch anything, but then I realized today I had seen something. I don't remember what it was.
all right.
So I don't think I've seen anything that I can recall yet.
Oh, all right. All
I
right.
pulled a U, and as you've been
Good.
doing.
Good. About time. Yes.
What about you?
Influencer. Well, I got a few things watched. Only one of them is actually new, but the other two were new to me.
Okay.
So there is this weird little indie film that no one's like ever heard of. It's like a comedy horror kind of
Hmm.
movie about a pizza delivery boy who gets murdered and the investigation that happens around it. Well, investigation is used loosely. Uh, there is no real investigation, but it's a silly little film. It's called Slice. It's
Okay.
on HBO, if I remember right. You can find that on HBO at the moment. If you like quirky, stupid, kind of funny in a bad B movie style way, this
Yeah, which
movie
I
was
do.
enjoyable. I really enjoyed it. It's about this town where like they've divided this town, ghosts, werewolves, witches, all of the spooky things and horror are real in this world.
Okay.
And so ghosts have jobs, witches try to stay secret, and werewolves, well, there's only one werewolf they talk about, and he drives a moped. So, but it was enjoyable. I had fun watching that one. And then I finally, after so many years and so many times that you have mentioned this movie, whether it's on the show or just in normal conversation,
Yeah.
you do tend to bring up the movie As Above, So Below quite
I
often. And
This very week, I was hoping, I was like, I talk about this movie on the show so much, and I was debating if I put it in my list or not for this very reason. And then I was also like, I can't believe Dustin still hasn't watched this movie because I have praised it, and
well,
here you are. I
here I
realized
am. I
I
finally
imagined
sat
it to
down.
into reality at this point.
You did. It's whatever. That's anyways. I watched
Manifested
it
it.
and I did enjoy it. You are correct. You knew I was going to enjoy it. I very much enjoyed it. Um, being the kind of person who is like, I'm trying to think of how to not spoil stuff in it.
Mhm.
I kind of knew what was going on, and that made the movie way more enjoyable for me. Where it was like,
Yeah.
oh, they're doing this really well, actually. This is
Mhm.
cool. I really like this. This is interesting. Yeah, way better than what IMDb claims it to be. Like, that
Yeah.
was way more enjoyable, very well made. So kudos to you, Jake. You were correct. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. I feel validated. Yeah,
You
that's
should.
exactly why I feel like if you watch it on multiple times, then you get more out of it because then you know what's going on and you kind of can
Yeah.
pick up more. Oh, why exactly is this happening? And what does it mean? What is the meaning
Yeah.
behind that happening to them? Or what effect does that have on the
My I started
history of the
having
character?
suspicions about it and was like, well, this feels really familiar. And when it ended, being who I am, hit up all the
Mhm.
fun trivia and tidbits about it and was like, ooh, I was right. Ooh, I was right. So yeah, very enjoyable. And then I did go and see The Creator.
Mm.
So Jake, have you noticed I've been kind of quiet every time you bring up The Creator when you're like, this is my most anticipated movie of the year?
Yes,
Yeah, because I was not excited for it.
really.
Really. I did
What
not think
what
it
was it
looked,
about the promotion that didn't grab you or turned you off even?
I don't, it just didn't seem interesting to me. I thought,
Okay.
ooh, the CGI looks really good, but this just doesn't, it wasn't grabbing me.
Mhm.
So I went and watched it and I did not like it. I know I'm in the minority, but I thought like
Mhm.
there is not much to cheer about in this movie. And I totally get it.
Yeah.
Many people are going to love it. We will get into the details of why I did not after you watch it,
Yeah.
because I can't share any details. But I was like, yeah, it ended,
Okay.
and I was like, first one out of the theater, which no one was in. It was me and like three other people. Um,
That is what the box office numbers are indicating.
but I also kind of put that up to like, I went in the middle of the day.
Yeah, sure.
So school's in place. No one else is going to a movie. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I was not a fan. I thought acting was good. The CGI is really good.
Yeah.
And that's about where it ended for me. I was like, I am
Really?
not the target audience for this movie at all.
Alright. Yeah,
Yeah.
curious. I see it tomorrow, and we'll see what I think. Hopefully, it's not a Beau is Afraid situation where you're completely right. And
I I left thinking I could see Jake going either way with this movie. Like, I was really
Mm,
confident that you were going to hate Beau is Afraid almost as much as I did.
yeah.
Um, this one, I could totally see you going either way. I could actually see you loving it, and then rewatching it or just thinking about it, I could see you starting to be like, oh
Hmm.
wait, okay, never mind. But I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll find out. We'll find out.
Okay. Yeah. Another fun thing to bring up is after our film versus film Scorsese episode, we're also going to be sticking around to record um, a spoiler episode about the creator. So that's why we're both
Yeah.
seeing it. Um, and so we will be talking in detail about that. But I'll let you know, spoiler free, next episode, what I thought, so you can know if Dustin was right or wrong in the
Yeah.
end. um, is that all you saw?
Yeah. Yeah, that
Okay,
was it.
I remember the thing that I saw that I wanted to bring up that I
Oh,
didn't write
okay.
down, which is good because I enjoyed it. I just forgotten I enjoyed it. I saw the first episode of the Continental, which is the 3-part
Oh,
John Wick
yeah.
series thing, and it's pretty good. It's definitely interesting. I think that I'm interested to see where it goes. I haven't watched the second or third episode. I think that's all there is. It's a limited series.
Yeah, there's only
Um,
3 episodes for it.
I'm I really like having Mel Gibson in it. I wish he was in the actual movies because that would have been
Okay.
incredible. But he's good so far. I hope that he's in a lot more of it. I don't yet see Winston in the younger version of Winston, at least
Oh,
Ian
okay.
McShane's version. But maybe that will come. I hope. But the best part is, of course, the action is good. The action is on the level, and then also um, the lore is the best
Okay.
part, of course.
Yeah.
Seeing the stuff they do with the high table, the stuff they do with the um, inquisitors and stuff. It's interesting, and I want more of that world building straight in my veins. So I'm here for it.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. I forgot that came out. All right.
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
forgot a
think
lot
only
of
two
things
episodes
came
so
out.
far.
I was like, oh, like Gen V, the boys
Oh yeah,
spinoff on Prime, that already released.
yeah.
I'm super stoked for that because they're supposed to be characters they have not brought in to the boys yet from the comics that are supposed
I,
to feature in this series.
okay. I think I'm still a season
So
behind
I'm
on the
excited.
boys.
Okay. Well, there's a couple specific characters that I'm like, I have no clue how you can
Mhm.
even approach bringing this character into the show because of how gross they are in the comics. But apparently, one of them is there.
Okay,
So I'm
interesting.
curious to see how he is rewritten. I would imagine so.
Maybe, maybe not.
Hmm.
All right. I think that's all the housekeeping stuff.
I believe you are right, sir. I believe you're
Cool.
right.
So let's get into it. We're doing our
Woohoo!
top 10 horror movies of all time again. If
Again.
you're a long time listener, we did do our top 10 horror movies a long time ago, over 100 episodes ago, in the very
Mhm.
beginning, 2 years ago. And the audio was not that great, so we decided to re record it in our current semi professional setup. And also, my list at least has changed quite a bit, partly because I've seen new things that I fell in love with, and partly
Mhm.
because some of the things I had seen before that was either lower on the list or an honorable mention before got moved up because I've kept thinking about it. It's grown on me more and more, and I just
Right.
love it more than I did before. So there's a lot of surprises, even if you uh, listen to that old episode.
So I made it a point to not go back and look at the original or my original list. Because I was like, I don't want
Hmm.
that to influence how I make this new one. Um, my my gut tells me it might be pretty close to the original one, with a few shifts around, and I'm like, does that mean I'm consistent or what? I
Yeah,
will say
we'd like to try.
my honorable mention list is far too long, so I'm kind of chalking up my top 10 to be a lot like our top all-time uh
Mhm.
films of like, I guess this is my top 10 as of right now, or if it is as close to the original list, I guess it's a little longer than that, but
Yeah,
I really struggled making this list, man. This was really really tough for me, and
yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty confident with my top 10 right now, but it still could shift possibly even during the episode.
Yeah, I was telling you before we started recording, I've been tinkering up until the final minutes, um, just adding things in, moving things around, just rewatching trailers. I'm like, I know I just watched it, but I just need to refresh. How do I feel? Where am I at with this? So it's
Right.
very difficult. I also wrestled with picking my favorite horror movies because there are some that are horror movies, but I also consider like more like monster movies, and or they're not that scary, but they have horror elements. I've been in my head way too much, I think is the
Mhm.
problem, because I've also been on Instagram and I've seen people debating what is really a horror movie and what is not. I've seen people saying Hereditary is not a horror movie, and I'm confused by everything anymore. And I don't know if you have like a definition of a horror movie, because there's crossover between horror and thriller and suspense and
Well,
all of
that's the
those
joy
things.
of horror is it's kind of like the melting pot of every genre. I mean, you could look at Resident Evil like we talked about on the Final Girls episode,
Yeah,
where that actually could be considered just a straight action franchise, but it's still technically in a horror because of the monsters and the zombies and the
yeah,
gore. Um,
yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out why people claim Hereditary is not horror.
yeah. They're
It was
like, this is
scientific.
more of a family drama with some light supernatural aspects.
Light my ass. Have you not seen the last act of that film?
Oh, I
Uh,
have,
the
and
funny
I
thing
love it.
about those people trying to debate that is science already claimed it to be like the most scary film ever made because of people like the heart palpitations and shit
Mm,
that it was causing people when it first released.
yeah.
So science says fuck you. It is a horror film.
We had our own little debate about this recently because I was saying that Annihilation is a scary movie, and you said it's not a
You
horror
did say
movie.
that.
I think
And I
it's
said it is not.
the more that you
Yeah.
think about it and the more that you understand it, it's scary and horrific, and there are scary things in it. It's definitely sci-fi leaning, but you can have a sci-fi horror movie like Alien or whatever.
Right. I would say it's more on the sci-fi aspect of stuff. Like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when I say it out loud, but for some reason I can kind of lump Annihilation in with there's this older film from like the late 90s with Johnny Depp. It's called The Astronaut's Wife. Um
Okay.
where people had claimed that movie was like very scary, but it's just a sci-fi film with some
Mm,
thriller elements. I kind of chalk Annihilation in with that, where it's just I can see why people claim it to be scary or have horror parts.
mhm.
I'm pretty positive people really focus in on the bear for that kind of
Yeah.
part. Um, the bear's
The bear
cool.
the bear and the lighthouse parts are the scariest to me.
See, the lighthouse to me is the most sci-fi part of the whole film. Like,
Yeah.
it's just an interesting take on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't consider Annihilation scary at all. Now, granted, and you had to
Yeah,
tell
do
our
any of
friends
the
at B Critics
yeah, do you consider any of the
that
movies
I
on your
am
list
not,
scary?
not even a little bit. Literally, so
So
Jake, when
that's not
I
really
when I made my list, I was like, okay, let's see what kind of style of horror that I've got. Like, what's my mix? Like the
yeah.
fun, silly, entertaining, just enjoyable, the super disturbing, gross, like ew. Um, and I found myself out of 10 movies going fun, 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 fun. Well, that one's disturbing. Fun, 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 fun. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, uh,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't get scared by the genre.
I tried to do ones that I felt, at least at some point, scared by or deeply moved by. Not like scared, like actually scared, but scared in the sense that it made me, I don't know, ponder it and feel dread or feel something. That's why I like horror movies a lot, even though I don't get like terribly like afraid of them, and I don't feel like I get the adrenaline rush that some people get, and that's why they like it, because it's like
Mhm.
it makes you jump or whatever. I don't really get that. I like the different emotions that it makes you feel, and if you can put yourself in their shoes and feel the tension, I guess that's different than every other kind of movie out there. And that, like, you're right,
Yeah.
that definitely has all of the elements of, there's really funny parts and really actiony, gory parts, and all, like, it can have everything. Even romance can be in there.
Oh,
Um,
100%.
so I think it's a great genre.
It's an amazing genre. Yeah, I just it's weird for me because none of the movies on my list are scary to me. There's one on my list that did affect me while watching it. It'll come as no surprise which one that is. Uh, but for me, like when I watch horror, I tend to not hold too much against it unless it's made by David Gordon Green these days. Fuck you. Um,
Or Eli Roth.
or Eli Roth. Eli Roth's problem is he just gets so caught up in being as gross and gory that he
Hmm.
completely abandons what makes horror so enjoyable, which is like
Loses the point.
the investigations or the tension or, you know, just the suspense aspect of it can be more enjoyable than the actual gore.
Yeah.
Uh, and you can overdo it with gore. You really can.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I go for how does the movie when the end credits roll, am I like giggling with just that was awesome. If a horror film makes me feel
Hmm.
that way, I'm like, yeah, I'm a fan. Like, bring on the
Yeah.
cheese fest, bring on the silliness. I'm for it, unless you take beloved characters and storylines and completely destroy them. Again, fuck you, David Gordon Green. Um,
Yeah. That's the one like thing, even though it's hurting my draft and it might lose me the belt, I'm so content that Exorcist sucks and David Gordon Green sucks and that Halloween may be moving on to another studio. Like, that brings me a little joy.
yeah, yeah, when I found out A24 is like the top bidder or whatever for the
Mhm.
franchise, I was like, that could be cool, but I almost feel like we don't need another Michael Myers reboot. Like,
Yeah.
just leave us with what we've got. We can ignore this most recent trilogy and
Mhm.
just have fun with the shitty sequels, the Rob Zombie reboot, and the amazing first three. So
Yeah.
just leave us with that. Just leave us with that.
Yeah, I noticed why I have an interesting trend in my list, which is that almost all, the vast majority of my picks are either the first or second film from that filmmaker, and a lot of them are the same
Oh,
writer and
really?
director. Um, and so I'll be pointing that out.
Huh.
It was actually, as I was looking them up, I was like, I can't believe that's their first movie. That's amazing. Um,
All
and
right.
then you should also know, because you've been calling me out on it recently, I have no sci-fi movies on my list, for one. And I also did not put Hereditary on my list, for two, because you basically banned me from putting it on my list.
I didn't ban you from bringing up Hereditary at all. You do
You're
bring it
like,
up
you're
almost
not
every
gonna put
episode.
Hereditary on your list, are you? And I was like, maybe. And you're like, it was in my top 10 all time, very high. I think I had it number 3, still
Yeah.
do, still stand by that. So
Yeah.
obviously, it's my favorite horror movie of all time. So
Right.
everybody would know that, and everybody should know that. So I did want to include some other things that are more interesting. I have things that are a couple things that are mainstream, and more than a couple things that are not, and that I think are good recommendations, especially as we're in the Halloween season. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, my list is just movies that I either find myself returning to several times. Some of them wouldn't be considered on any realm like mainstream. This is filmmaking. A handful of them, I'm sure people would be like, "Really?" Yes, really.
Mhm.
They're enjoyable. They have like they touch on some of the best aspects of the genre and they have fun
Mhm.
with it. So, yes. My like my beer, these are comfy movies to me. These are the ones for
Mhm.
like stressful day, pop one of these on and it's like listening to metal for me where it's just like,
Yeah.
peace and serenity. And now people think I need
As
help.
there's chainsaws and screaming.
And guts and
Yeah.
screaming and yeah. Um, I love this
Okay.
genre. Like right out the gate, everyone that knows me should know I adore this genre. I cherish this genre. I know, Jake, you know me probably the best. You know how much I watch horror and just love it. And kind of like I was explaining to my daughter because she asked me why I love these movies so much and constantly watch them and telling her like, dude, like when you go from being afraid of everything to like using these movies to kind of help you, well, not even help, but bust
Mm.
through that, like they kind of connect with you permanently from then on. They're a part of you. So I love these movies.
Yeah,
Love it.
definitely. So do you want to go first? Or
Sure.
turn the honors
I
to you?
can. I can go first. All right. So we've talked a bunch already about our lists are like, man, we've been tinkering with this so much.
Mhm.
My number 10 is one from a pretty prominent name, especially in the genre. Uh, but this is one that I think got mocked and forgotten of his, but I think it's his most enjoyable or just flat out like entertaining of all of
Mhm.
his movies. Um, it's super silly, and that's what makes it so much fun. But I'm obsessed with this movie. I watch it constantly. But James Wan's vision when it comes to horror is very
Mhm.
unique, but at the same time, it's such a great callback to classic horror tropes or just styles. You can see all the influence from like Hitchcock in his stuff, which is always fun for me. But this one, when you take like lore in a small town that's like kind of spooky just by nature, and then you add wooden puppets like ventriloquist dolls, and for the fans of old school Goosebumps, it's like having, you know, I just forgot his name, but having the doll from Goosebumps, but a whole movie kind of using that style, very joyful for me, very fun. So Dead Silence is my number 10. It is such it's just it's so silly, but the
Uh-huh.
lore, this whole like ghost story that he created for this movie is just a blast. And I watched it on a like, well, this movie's gonna suck. I'll probably hate it, but let's see what it's about. That was years ago when it first came out. And I think I watch it several times a year. It's just
Oh,
one
wow.
it's one that I just return to every time. And I wasn't going to have it on the list at first, but the more I
Mhm.
thought about it and trying to make this list, I was like, I owe this movie the credit to just be like, I watch you all the time. You're just you have to be one of my favorites. I wouldn't watch you that much if you weren't. So, Dead Silence. It's just a good one.
I've never heard of this movie, and I'm very intrigued because it's the movie that James Wan made right after Saw, and
Yeah.
he co-wrote it with Lee Wanell, the same guy he wrote Saw with, which is very interesting. And has Donnie Wahlberg, and like it's a kind of like a
Yeah.
soft fan continuation movie. Looks like.
It's like it's just a good it's a good horror film. They create this really cool like lore for the town that the movie takes place in. The backstory is really interesting. Um
Hmm.
and it's clever. It actually is a clever movie. He does really fun tricks with the filmmaking, with the jump scares, with just the
Hmm.
atmosphere of the film itself. I love it. Absolutely love it.
You're saying all the right things. I love movies that are very clever. I love movies with a lot of lore. This sounds right up my alley.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I will check it out immediately, and I will not wait 5 years or whatever to see it like you did with As Above, So Below.
I, I was like, Jake will be so proud of me. And
I
here
am
you
so
are
proud.
giving me shit. But I earned it, so it's
Yeah,
okay.
it didn't redeem you, but I am proud of you. My number 10, like you, this spot especially was very contentious because it's the last one to make it onto the list. And so a lot of things were in it at various times. But the one that I stuck with to the end is maybe a surprise. I think that this movie is not as, I think, as it gets the prestige that a lot of other movies get, partly because it's a Netflix movie and it wasn't like a theatrical release.
Right.
And I have two of those on my list actually. So, but at number 10, I have Bird Box, which
Oh,
I remembered really, really liking. So I rewatched it and I was like, God damn, this movie's good. Like, it's really good. And
god
it's good
damn.
for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, we love Sandra Bullock and she's amazing.
Oh, so much.
And to have her in a horror movie is just the best thing ever. The cast is stacked, not just with her, but especially John Malkovich. He's
Mm-hmm.
amazing in this movie, and and Sarah Paulson is her sister. All of the other like side characters are great, um, except maybe Machine Gun Kelly. I didn't realize he was in this movie,
Oh, I
but
forgot he was in that. Why does he
he
have to
is.
ruin everything? What a douche.
He has like two lines. It doesn't really matter. And he looks like a douche, so you can kind of just assume he is, and it works. But I love it shares a lot in common with Night of the Living Dead, I was realizing, because we talked about that recently,
Mhm.
and I was watching this, and it's the same sort of thing where a massive apocalyptic type event happens. A girl and her partner kind of get rushed towards this house with a bunch of strangers, and you learn a lot about what's happening to them and what's happening in the world through the TV and the radio and
Right.
stuff. It's just like an updated, totally refreshed way without being too obvious that they're stealing those things from it, um, which I really like as a fan of that movie, obviously. And then I think it's such an effective device to have to not be able to see the monsters, to put the audience in the shoes of the people in the movie, the characters, that you can't see these things because if you do, then something will happen and you will go crazy and want to
Hmm.
kill yourself. and maybe even love it and want to kill other people as well. And so it's just there's so many things about it that's so effective and so scary and so well thought out and executed. And then there's also a ton of heart in the movie with Sandra
Hmm.
Bullock and her. pregnancy and her giving birth, and then having this kid and trying to get it through the apocalypse, and having another kid brought in and trying to get him through the apocalypse. It's just really, really good. And so I was like, this movie is better than expected, better than remembered, and so it needs to get some love. And I had to have it on my list.
I respect that. I remember it came out, it was like huge when it released on Netflix. It was all over
Very,
everything.
very memeable.
Yeah, and then people started trashing on it. I talked to so many people that were like, that movie blows. And I was like, well, I don't know if I should watch it now. I was like, I mean, I didn't actually think that, but I was thinking like, okay, so what makes it so bad? And
Yeah.
I remember finally sitting down to watch it. And my kind of mentality going into it was like, oh, they're just trying to follow in the footsteps of A Quiet Place, but instead of making noise, now you can't see.
Right.
So, ooh,
It's like, oh, it's another sense
right, like
deprivation horror movie. Yeah.
let's see what we're doing. And I remember when it ended, just being like, why aren't people liking this movie? This was
Mhm.
well made. Like, this deserves to be seen. This is a good movie. Why aren't people enjoying it? But teach their own.
Mhm.
Teach their own. I'm sure I'll
Sure.
get lots of questions of how can you say Dead Silence is an amazing film and then you just said the creator kind of sucked. And I'm like, I just
That's how things work.
it's how things work, man. I'm just not that target audience. I respect that pick, Jake. That's a good pick. I kind of forgot about Bird Box. I should rewatch
I
that.
know. It's easy to do. It's one of those movies you're like, oh yeah, I like that. I should have watched that
Yeah,
again.
I should rewatch that. All right. Well, my number 9, I feel like I probably shouldn't say too much about it because it's one that's going to get featured in our next episode of October.
Okay. Sure.
So I'll try to keep it brief. But my number 9 has stuck with me since I worked at that video rental store and a coworker told me about it, convinced me to watch it.
Mhm.
This movie has just, I can never get it out of my head, which is funny because if you've seen the movie, you're like, that's kind of what the movie's about, is not getting the stuff out of your head. Or at least that's an
Mhm.
aspect of it. But In the Mouth of Madness, it is by John Carpenter. I told you he was going to show up.
It's inevitable.
It is inevitable. This is just such, I can't believe more people have not seen this movie, especially fans of this genre. Sam Neill plays this like insurance fraud investigator kind of guy who gets hired to go and find this author who has vanished out of thin air.
Mhm.
And the author happens to be this highly acclaimed, prolific horror genre writer who outsells everybody. He's the top game. It takes a lot of a lot of inspiration from like a mixture of Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft. Like it mixes both of
Okay.
those worlds into this one 96-minute film that has scenes in it where you're just like, this is bonkers. What the hell? This came out in like 93. What the hell? It's so
Yeah.
good. It's so cool. It's so much fun. But the weirdness of it, especially if you like H.P. Lovecraft, In the Mouth of Madness is like, it is probably as close to getting an H.P. Lovecraft story, like a good one,
Yeah.
put on the big screen. It's as close as we're going to get unless someone actually makes Cthulhu, which no one has for some reason. Get on that, writers who are no longer on strike. Uh,
Yeah. What have you been doing this whole
come
time?
on now. But yeah, so In the Mouth of Madness is my number 9.
Yeah, it's a movie that you've brought up on the pod once, and it was a while ago. Might have been a hidden gem or something. It's the first time I had really heard about it, and so I wrote it down and have been meaning to watch
Yeah.
it, and I'm excited to do it for our John Carpenter episode finally because I have to. And so I cannot wait to talk about it after I see it then.
Yeah. It'll be nice to actually
My number
fully talk
nine.
about it when I get that opportunity.
Yes, so check out next episode if you want to hear more about that movie. My number 9 is a movie that you briefly mentioned at the end of last episode because the main character in it is one of your honorable mentions in the Final Girls episode. And it was very difficult for me to not chime in and give away the fact that I also love this movie and will have it on my top 10 horror list.
Yeah.
So my number 9 is The House of the Devil from Ty West. And of course, Samantha is the final girl in that.
Yep.
It's uh, if you liked X or Pearl, or you're excited about Maxine and you like the Ty West written and directed by movies, you should definitely check out The House of the Devil because it's one of his first movies. I think it's his first big
I think
major
it was his first
feature.
feature.
I
Yeah.
think so too. Yeah, and it is very obviously a love letter to 70s and 80s horror movies. Like it takes, I feel like all of those horror movies, like the John Carpenter ones, like Halloween or whatever, they tried something, and a lot of them tried things and they didn't work. But some of them tried something and it kind of accidentally worked. House of the Devil kind of takes the things that worked and makes an intentional movie using all of those things.
Yeah.
So it feels very familiar in its long shots and slow building tension and just following this college girl around as she's struggling to make money, struggling to get an apartment, all this stuff. Move out from her roommate who's having sex all the time, and so
Right.
she's they quintessential final girl virgin, all that good stuff. It has Greta Gerwig as her friend. People who are fans of Greta Gerwig now after Barbie should check it out for that. Not in it a lot, but it's a fun little, oh hey, that's Greta Gerwig moment.
Yep.
And The House of the Devil is just one of those movies that it builds tension very slowly throughout the first half or so, and then when you least expect it, shit just pops off, and you're like, "Oh my god, I wasn't ready for this." I was kind of lulled into a piece of like, "Oh, this is kind of like you're building tension, but it's also kind of beautiful and peaceful and slow and nice." I
It's a
could fall asleep
pretty quiet movie
until
for the
it's
most
not,
part.
and people
Up
start
until it's not.
dying, and yeah. And yeah, it's a simple movie, and I think that's why I like it so much. That it just follows this girl who gets a babysitting job, and the couple is kind of nice, kind
And
of,
things are just weird after that.
uncomfortable. Yeah, there's an awkwardness or a weirdness, but maybe they're just awkward, and maybe they're not going to kill you. You don't really know. And yeah, so I just love it, and then I love how it just escalates so quickly and goes to places that you didn't quite expect. You're like, this is way more fully formed than I anticipated with this very simple beginning, and so it's very, I think, well thought out, and I just enjoy it every time. So House of the Devil 2009, check it out.
I've been a fan of Ty West for a while. I think the first one that I really paid attention to, he had this movie called The Innkeepers. It's about this hotel that's going out of business. It's its final week, and the two clerks decide to spend the final week like doing a paranormal investigation, or the final night. Sorry, it's the final night to do a paranormal investigation. There's this like ghost story associated with the hotel. And I love that movie so much. And that was one where it was like, okay, let's see what else Ty West has done. And I've been watching this stuff since. And House of the Devil was that one. Really, it's a special movie. It's so jacked up, but it's a special movie.
Yeah.
But I think Ty West, I think he deserves more acclaim than what he's given. And I kind of can't believe he hasn't blown up to be like the next James Wan or whoever.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
But I think his eye for the tricks and stuff for the genre is right up there with all the masters that have been doing it for years. I think he just gets it. I think he has fun with it. And I kind of have to respect him for staying small. I think
Yeah.
it gives him a little more control on what he's making. I mean, the success of X and Pearl, and I'm sure Maxine is going to be
Yeah.
another success under his belt. He'll probably start getting bigger projects now, but check out Ty West stuff. It's just good. It really is.
Yeah. It's very cool, very small.
Well, my number 8 is the first super obvious OG, like heavy hitter, because I can't have this kind of list without some heavy hitters, some obvious, like, no shit, Sherlock kind of hitters. But I will never deny how much I love Freddy Krueger. Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, is just, it is one of those movies, dude. Every time I watch it, I don't stop smiling throughout the entire movie. Wes Craven, like, genius. Freddy Krueger is just, he's awesome. He's so much fun to like watch and hear him, you know, tell his victims like, I'm gonna kill you, bitch. Like, the amount of times he calls people bitch in the whole franchise is just, it's hilarious. But that first Nightmare is special. I always respect when it came out. It was so new and weird, and I kind of wish we did that episode of like being able to see a film for the very first time,
Yeah.
kind of forget and then go back. This is one I wouldn't want to necessarily forget, but I think it would be so much fun to go back when it first released and be able to watch the audience react to it for the first time, because it has some freaky shit in it. My daughter was asking me about some of the stuff in it because she always, the way I talk about it, I think she's thought that it's a comedy. And then I started telling her
Like, it's
about, like,
amazing. It's so fun. It's hilarious. It
right.
calls people bitch.
And I was telling her about a couple of the kill scenes, and she just looked at me. She goes, "Oh my God, they show that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was
What
like,
is
"All right,
wrong with you?"
maybe it's not as funny as I remember or like portray it to be, but that original one, it's just, I think there is a very specific or like a very good reason why it has stood the test of time, especially for this genre, which is constantly trying to outgross, outgore, outscare whatever predecessor, the movies have. But you always come back to Freddy. Freddy's just, he's always like, you watch the original one and you're just, this is just well made. This is just a good film. So I love Freddy. Nightmare on Elm Street is amazing.
I meant to say it last episode because you had you mentioned it on the Final Girls episode, and I was like nodding along and going, "Yeah, yeah, But in all honesty, I have never seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
I'm kind of not shocked.
Okay, well, that's good. I feel bad about it because I know that it's one of the legendary ones up there with Friday the 13th and Halloween, and I've seen those. I just haven't seen that one. And I also feel bad because I do love Wes Craven, but I don't have the history with horror that you do. I have, like, I didn't see Scream until 10 years ago. And Christy was like, "Oh my God, you haven't seen Scream? We need to watch it right away." I just assumed that all of these movies were like the cheesy 90s, 80s horror movies that everybody's like, "Oh, they're fine. They're fun, but they're not like amazing." And then I watched Scream and I was like, "Oh my God, it's amazing." And so I'm sure that will happen with Nightmare on Elm Street too, because I do think that Wes Craven's a genius and I have liked everything I've ever watched. The People Under the Stairs is like, this is way better than anybody gives it credit for.
Oh, 100%. That one was on one of our hidden gem episodes. I think we both had that one on.
I think so.
That's a great film.
So I owe it to cinema to watch it at some point.
It's true. It's true. You really do. It's just enjoyable. And the stuff he pulled off during that time period is like, this is fantastic. Especially with like practical effects and being forced to figure out how they're going to do some of the effects. That is just like, that's going to trigger you and you're going to be like, that is awesome. Holy
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah, I should do that. I'll do that. I'll do that this October, this spooky season. That will be my homework to do.
It's a good one.
Well, my number 8 is also my maybe first obvious pick because I do talk about it all the time. You're obviously aware that I'm a fan of this franchise and of this movie, and so it is on my list. My number 8 is Saw, particularly the original, but I do like all of them.
Mhm.
I was thinking recently because Socks is coming out, and I was like, I should rewatch them because I don't quite remember like 6 and 7, like at the later years. Um, but I've been defensive on Instagram recently about Saw because a lot of people will be like, it's just gore porn or whatever,
Yeah.
and it is intentionally forcing people to do things in these traps or make the decision to do things to their own bodies in order to survive, and that is very uncomfortable to watch a lot of times. So I get why they say that. There is a aspect of that, but the reason I like it is because there's more to it. There's a whole nother level of actually a rich story and deep motivation and very scary moments, honestly, with Jigsaw's motivation of not killing anybody ever, that
Yeah.
he will kidnap them. Yeah, that's illegal, but it's not, they're not dying from it. He will kidnap them and then put them in a situation because he knows for whatever reason that they've kind of been throwing their life away, and he thinks that life is precious and they should either get on with it and move on if they don't really care about their life, or learn to actually appreciate the life they have, and then gives them the opportunity to make that decision or earn their freedom back, and generally in a very terrible way. But that, I think that's the best part. And the first movie is crazy good. My only reason for having it a little lower is that I don't adore the editing choices in it. There's a lot of epileptic cutting and things that happens that is
Yeah.
kind of abrasive, and so I don't watch it all the time, but I do enjoy it when I watch it. Um, the rest of it, everything that happens, the flow of the movie, the performances from Carrie Ells and Danny Glover and several actors from Lost, which I love seeing them pop in. It's great and has one of the greatest stories and endings and flows. The kidnapping scenes with the whether it's in
I was gonna
um,
say
the
the dark
car
apartment.
park,
I remember watching the dark apartment scene in
yeah.
the closet, watching that in the theater, and being like, "Oh, this is intense." Like I wasn't scared, but it was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, this is oh, this is why we
Yeah.
don't like the dark houses." It has nothing to do with supernatural shit. It's like,
I still remember the very first time I watched it, and I didn't see it in a theater, but I saw it on DVD. And that scene when the lights go out and he doesn't have a flashlight and he uses the flash on the
yeah,
camera to light the room, and you just have like a flash of light, and then whatever image that lit up is kind of burned in your mind, and you're like, did I see anything? Did I not see anything? I don't really
right.
know. That I just remember, like, you breathe way more shallowly the whole time.
Mhm.
You'd have that, I don't know. I guess it's fear building up in you, and that's the first movie that I remember like ever feeling that in a very long time. So it has a special place in my heart for that
Yeah.
reason, I think.
I've always like I enjoy the franchise. I probably don't enjoy it as much as like you do, but I do enjoy it. I mean, I have all of them. And I really want
Mhm.
to see Saw X. Um, but that first Saw to me is the best written. I think it has the best intention. The first
Mhm.
three I really, really enjoy. It's post Jigsaw. Uh, I feel like it just does kind of fall into the gore porn
Yeah.
arena. that so many audiences chalk the whole franchise up to.
Yeah, I think
Which
the
I get,
writing is
because
rushed. They're rushed in the sense that we
yeah,
need to put
well,
out
because
a
they were trying,
new Saw movie because it's Halloween or whatever.
yeah, that like from 4 through 8, I think it was, or whatever. It
Mhm.
was every year was, oh, we have another Saw, and it was like you literally just finished that other one. So the
Yeah,
writing, you could
and it
tell, was like, pump the
it
shit
kinda
out,
just
guys.
becomes, "What traps can we think of?" and do crazy things like that.
Right, and you could tell that the traps kind of stopped being as clever,
Mhm.
like as the franchise moved on. I think the first Saw, the traps in the first one to me are like the most, well, besides the needle pit. The needle pit in the second movie is probably one of
Yeah.
the most like squirmy scenes for me. I don't even have a problem with needles, but there's something about that scene every time that you're like, oh, oh, this
Yeah.
is bad. This is not good time.
Right.
But that first Saw is
Yeah,
pretty
it
cool.
just
I
looks
really like
gross
that one.
too.
Well, my number 7 is one that I have mentioned a decent amount of times, but it's never shown up on an actual list. I've had it as honorable mentions or just talked about it in general. Um, but this is one that I had watched after finding an article claiming that it was like one of the scariest movies that was streaming at that time. And I was like, well, let's see it. Let's go ahead. Let's see if I finally get spooked by a movie. I
Mhm.
didn't get spooked, but I really enjoyed all the tricks they did and just the way it was written and filmed. Um, and it's one that I instantly clicked with, became obsessed with. Uh, I ended up like finding a physical, because when it was streaming at that time, you couldn't find the physical copy like in a store. You had to go online and actually hope, okay, did they actually make a physical copy of this one? And they did,
Mhm.
and I bought it like immediately after watching it. I think it was on Netflix at that time. But anyways,
Mhm.
um the Autopsy of Jane Doe is just, it
Oh,
has
yeah.
stuck with me so much. And every time I watch it, I am always finding myself just like, this is so well made. Yes, it has some
Mhm.
like predictable, cheesy horror genre tropes or whatever, but it's done so well. There's so many parts of this movie that are just like, this is great. And for being someone who
Mhm.
really likes the investigation part of a horror film, especially supernatural,
Mhm.
uh, that's what this whole movie is. It's literally an autopsy and the investigation of how do these injuries, how can we figure out how this person died from these injuries, and then all the freaky shit just happens. The more the investigation unfolds, the worse things get, and it's just fantastic.
Mhm.
It's such a good movie.
Mhm.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that I enjoy as well, and I feel like I occasionally see somebody praise it and everybody's like, "Oh yeah, that's really well done and really well written." One of those movies that the horror is one of those genres that gets kind of poo-pooed a lot and people shit on it and they're like, "Yeah, it's I don't know, pedestrian to be excited about horror movies." But I think that The Autopsy of Jane Doe is especially one that people are like, "No, that one's actually good." People agree.
That one's got some really good parts in it. And
Mhm.
I we mentioned it earlier in the episode, I get really happy and excited when a horror film will kind of like tweak a trick that
Mhm.
that will mess with people so bad. And the Autopsy of Jane Doe does it constantly throughout the film. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just so much fun for me. You brought up on that one of our collaborations that we're doing on social media right now. It's like the uh, horror, some of our
Mhm.
favorite horror little subgenre things. Uh, we recently had the song. Like, what's a favorite song? I went very
Yeah.
predictable and said the Halloween theme song, and I still stand by it. And then you had the
It's the best.
brilliant pick of the hide and seek song from Ready or Not. Autopsy of Jane Doe has a song that I feel deserves kind of the third spot, and it's a song that constantly plays on the radio every time they start really getting into the autopsy, because it has nothing to do with being a scary song,
Yeah.
but it's such a bubbly, happy song, and every time it plays, you're just like, this
Oh no.
is great. Yeah, you're like, oh shit,
Something else is going to
good.
happen.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
you guys gotta stop. You have to stop. Stop what you're doing.
Mhm.
But it is one I've just connected with it so much. It's another one that really helped breathe a whole new, like, rejuvenating life into my love for the genre, and so it had to be on this list. I couldn't leave it off.
Yeah, that's an incredible one. I definitely agree. My number 7 is probably the least scary movie on my list, but also it's a movie that has stuck with me so hard since I first saw it. And I remember you and I saw this together, and we just, like, we did, stood in this parking lot
Oh
thinking
yeah.
about it and talking about
I
it.
was wondering
And
if
then
you were going to bring this one up.
I remember just thinking about it for weeks, and after seeing it, like, it's a movie that I would love to do a full episode on because I adore this movie. So my number 7 is It Comes at Night, which unfairly, I feel like, probably had pretty bad marketing because, well, the title alone implies that there's something that's going to come out at night and it's going to be a monster, and the the trailer and stuff kind of also implied that there's a thing that comes out at night and it's, dangerous and all this stuff. The movie isn't that at all. It's very, I don't even really know how to describe it, but I definitely recommend it. I think the thing to know about It Comes at Night is that if you expect there to be a big monster, you're going to be disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
If you expect to watch a movie about two families in an intense post-apocalyptic situation that they don't really know what's going on, they're just trying to survive, and they don't know who to trust, and they kind of get put together. Um, it seemed, my love for it is that the thing that comes at night is fear,
Yeah.
and that fear alone is enough, that there doesn't really have to be anything out there. But if you are convinced that there might be, and you are afraid enough, that will make people do different things and turn on each other and and do things that are inexplicable or that they regret to each other. And so that is, I think, what this movie is to me. And it's really, really, really well done. I love Joel Edgerton and everything that he does. If he's in a movie, I will immediately watch it. And visually, this movie is very, very good. There are scares in it. There's things that happen that are kind of jump scary, but not in like a aha, like a big music sting kind of thing. It's just like there's some very creepy, very weird visuals, but
I
it's
was going to say
more,
there's a couple specific imagery or pieces of
yeah.
imagery that stand out in my mind,
Hmm.
that are like, yeah,
And
they're not.
I kind of forget about those parts, but they're very good. I do like that they're there.
Yeah, well, they're not like, I don't remember them being very jump scary, or like
Hmm.
that being the tool. They're just kind of there
Yeah,
abruptly. So if you jump, you jump,
right.
but it's just, yeah, It Comes at Night. I remember watching it and just thinking, like, solitude is bad. Like, in a high
Yeah.
stress situation where you don't have the answers and you
Hmm.
are stuck indoors, potentially with other people that you might invite in, but you don't know if you should. You don't know if they're going to bring something in with them or whatnot.
Hmm.
Solitude is bad. When you cut
Hmm.
yourself off from the world, solitude is bad, especially for long extended periods of time. Um,
It's almost like this movie came out not long before we all
that's
learned that harsh lesson ourselves.
I was about to try to make a joke of being like, but then back to the movie. We're not talking about shut down.
Real life, the
Yeah,
last three
but
years.
yes, Which, by the way, I tried watching. It comes at night during like the initial shutdowns. I did watch it, but
Yeah.
that was a movie that I remember watching while everyone was like isolated, just being like, probably not the best one to watch in this kind of
No.
situation. Not a
Unless you're there with a notepad, like taking notes, you're like,
right.
okay, I
Okay,
need to
so
get
what
some
am I avoiding
chickens. I need
doing?
to, yeah.
We're gonna.
Don't invite strange families in, even if they're nice. Yeah.
That
So,
is a great pick.
you,
I was wondering if you were gonna have it on your list. I agree with you. I think that is a movie that deserves a very heavy deep dive. So that will
Mhm.
probably be one that's at some point in the
I think
future.
it's the most debatably horror movie on my list, but in my
I get
mind, it's definitely a horror
I get
movie.
that. I get that. I would chalk it up to horror. I mean, it's a psychological kind of horror
Hmm.
film. So I'm
True.
with you on that one. I'm with you on that one.
Okay. I appreciate the support.
All right. Well, I know Jake said he wasn't going to have it on his list. It's
Yes.
it's this will probably be the quickest mention because I don't think there's literally anything new either one of us could say about it. The movie is just genius.
Hmm.
It's the movie that for the first time in a long time when I watched it in the theater actually got a reaction out of me. It wasn't a jump. It was literally me stopping my popcorn and being like, "Oh, is that kind of film?"
Hmm.
I still think the subtlety in it is the highlights of the film. When everything escalates,
Hmm.
it's amazing, but it's the quieter, subtle moments in it that are so effective. And Toni Collette is a goddess among this genre. So Hereditary is my number 6. Um,
Yeah.
I There's nothing new we can
It's
say.
not gonna
Just
be
the movie's
it's not gonna be
fucking
short. We
amazing.
need to talk about it. I'm so glad you brought it up and I didn't have to not talk about it on this episode. Yeah, I fucking love Hereditary. Let me take over your position, your spot here. Hereditary is great because the thing about it that I just will never forget is how deeply I cared for these characters. And when the famous thing happens in the movie that everybody knows, but you may not if you haven't seen it, so I don't want to spoil it. The thing that happens that made you stop eating your popcorn, when that happens, I just remember caring so much and dreading how are you going to get past that? Like
Yeah.
how do you tell your mom about that? How do you just do you do what he does and let her find out? Like, do you tell her? That's impossible to have the right answer. There's no right answer, and it's just the most dreadful situation possible. And so that feeling I've never felt in a movie before
Hmm.
or since. And I think that's part of the reason that I love it so much. There's also, I mean, all of the cult stuff, which I know if you don't um, like you said, the subtlety is incredible from the model movements and the way that it melds the models with real life
Yeah.
and the
The
subtle
things in the corner.
yeah, subtle things in the background or in the dark that disappear. That is the absolute best. But the 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 cult following and how they're just always kind of there and you don't really notice until you start noticing, and then you rewatch the movie and you realize they're always there. They've been there the whole time, and it just makes you're off put even more every time you watch it. That part as well, I remember feeling such such kind of a grossness about.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is bad. This is achy.
There are several scenes in this movie that make me feel this is ew. This is just there's
Yeah.
nothing good about what's happening right now. But I am with you. The characters are so well performed.
Hmm.
Like I relate to that dad. I understand that dad so well, but he says so little. but it's all in just
Yeah.
every time he's like, you see him in his office or you hear him leaving messages or just trying to keep things together. But I think my favorite thing about Hereditary is, and I guess I could see how this might be where people try to debate that it's not horror, but I'm still not giving them too much leniency on that because it's a cult.
Yeah. Right.
Cults are bad. They're straight evil. Evil is horror. So debate over. Um,
Yep.
but the way that it takes grief and just kind of on an extreme level at times,
Mhm.
there, I can't even say like the whole time being an extreme example, because grief, people spiral like
Yeah.
she does every day due to grief, because no one
Right.
has ever fully understood how to handle grief. Everyone handles it differently or doesn't handle it at all. A lot of
Mhm.
time they're afraid to get over it. There's like sense of guilt if you try to get over it. There's so many
Yeah.
levels to it. And the way that this movie, Ari Aster, took grief, made it the focal point, and then just showcased all this like freaky shit on top of
Mhm.
it and her obsession with it and what it can do to someone. Um, and then you add in all the other stuff. Like, it is master storytelling. It is master filmmaking.
Mhm.
He did kind of the same thing with Midsummer. It's a shame he shit the bed with Beau is Afraid. Fuck that movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of great grief things in Midsummer as well.
Yeah. But yeah, Hereditary was just, I almost left it off the list out of spite because I was like, we've talked about it a lot. And then I rewatched it and it was like,
Mhm.
it was the first like subtle kind of
Mhm.
get under your skin scene. And I was just like, of course I'm having it on my list. What the fucking bitch?
God
Like,
damn, it's freaking
it
touched on
was
my
like,
list.
you dumbass, of course you were putting it on the list. Like,
Yep. It
so
is that
number
good.
six, it is that good.
Yeah, I've been seeing people also say that. I've been seeing a lot of people be like, this movie's overrated, this movie's underrated, and all this stuff. And I'm like, no way is Hereditary overrated. It is appropriately praised. It's as good as people say it is. And it's because of all the different layers that it has. It
Yeah.
is deeply about grief, and that is, and how people are scared to deal with it or get into it or get out of it or whatever. But it's also about, as the name implies, passing things on to your children, not just possessions and things like that, but also
Not just cults.
also just mental health issues and other
Yeah.
things that happen, um, or drugs and everything that can happen through parents, and just parents and children relationships is complicated. So it's masterful storytelling, like you
Yeah.
said. Completely
It
agree.
is.
My number 6 is sort of related because it's also the movie before Hereditary. The last time I remembered feeling that, leaving the theater and driving home and feeling kind of like, I don't know, a little afraid of the dark and a little bit. Like I had not felt that and been like, why am I feeling that? That's weird. I haven't felt that since I was like a little kid. I'm feeling a little nervousness, I guess. And so my number 6 is Paranormal Activity,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which I love how affected I was, particularly because it's such a small, simple film
Mm-hmm.
made for like $15,000.
They had to
And
film it in the director's house because they couldn't afford sets.
yeah, and no name actors. I love when there's a movie and I don't recognize anybody in it, because I feel like I can just connect to the characters better,
Mm-hmm.
because that person is that character in my mind. And and Paranormal Activity is, I mean, I like found footage style movies.
Yeah.
Think that it's an interesting way to get the audience out of their head and out of the filmmaking, film viewing process that they're used to, and consume something in a slightly different way. And Paranormal Activity does a great thing where it doesn't have, I mean, it commits completely. It doesn't have any credits, doesn't have any titles. It just kind of starts.
Yep.
And and the format I really, really enjoy. and I like the sequels as well. I like how it's tells the story and builds on the story and all this stuff. Same with Saw. I put Paranormal Activity and Saw on the same thing. It's like I like it. I like where it goes. I like what it does. Um, I think that Paranormal Activity is so effective because the things that are scary are like a knock. Like it feels. I don't. If because of the found footage style, it feels way more real. And so
Mhm.
when something happens, you believe it. When like the door moves
Yeah.
3 inches,
Night
you're
1,
like,
and the door just
yeah.
barely opens up a little more,
You're
and
like,
you're like
oh my god, did you
you're like,
see
"Fuck
that?
that,
Yeah.
guys. Fuck that. Nope. Nope, nope."
And yeah, and so things like just tiny things happen, and then you get like halfway into the movies, 2/3 way into the movie, and and then the day ends and the title card comes up. It's like night 10, and you're like, oh no, like it puts you in the emotional state of the characters that you start dreading when the night is coming, like
Yeah.
they are dreading when the night is coming. And then as the like timer on the screen fast forwards and you're like it's getting to be morning time, you feel a sense of relief as the sun is coming up like they
Right.
would feel. And I just love that. I think it's so brilliant. And and I've never searched every inch of a screen so much on any film as I have for Paranormal Activity, because you're looking at it and the time is like slowly ticking
And
and
you're
you're
trying to
like,
find
or
where is it?
yeah,
What's
or it'll
happening?
be like fast forwarding and
Yeah.
then stop and you're like, oh shit, something's gonna happen. And so you're watching, you're like, did that lamp move? Did that curtain move? What's happening? Is there a shadow over there? I don't know what's happening. You're watching every single piece. You're trying to and you can't, and you keep up, and it's brilliant and I love it, and I think that it deserves all the success that it had, especially for such a small film, and Oren Peli's first film, writer and
Yeah.
director. So I I I am a champion for it because it doesn't take a lot of money, it doesn't take huge actors, it doesn't take anything to connect with audiences, to give them something that they're like, yeah, that's real, I get it, I identify
Yeah.
with that, and I care about that, I'm affected by that. um, it takes so little. All it takes is, I guess, something real, something honest that people actually identify with, and this movie does it so well.
Yeah, that was one when it came out in theaters, all the hype around it was the film footage in the theater of audiences watching it and
Yeah,
freaking out. I think it
night
might
vision.
be the first movie that used that marketing style.
First
Um,
one I remember. Yeah.
and uh, a coworker slash family member of mine, her and I were like, let's do this. Let's go see Paranormal Activity in the theater. I don't get spooked. She was
Mhm.
like, I get scared so easily. I was like, sweet, let's do this. We went and watched it. And I remember instantly being like, no opening credits. The movie literally just the camera turns on. It's him setting it up,
Mhm.
being like, Katie's saying there's weird shit going on. I don't believe her. So we're doing this just to calm her down. Like, he's kind of a
Mhm.
douche.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, night 1 comes up, and I remember instantly thinking, like, oh, here we go. Like, the movie is literally letting you know this
Mhm.
is where we're gonna start. This is gonna like things are happening now. Because it's nighttime. Spooky shit's always
Mhm.
at nighttime. Yeah, I remember the door, like, nothing happens, and the door just barely like meh. And then it was the next day. And I remember just sitting in the theater being like, that that's brilliant. And thinking they better just keep building, like, piece
Mhm.
by piece. Don't go huge right away. You do very small, subtle
Mhm.
things. Let it, just build on itself. The tension build up, and that's exactly what that movie does. And
Mhm.
it's the best one of the series because of that fact. All the others kind of try to jump the gun a little quick on certain
Mhm.
aspects, or they really overdo it on others. I think the fourth and fifth one get a little like, okay,
Yeah.
guys, like you
Yeah.
kind of lost it. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that first one, I remember when it ended and we left the theater, I remember both of us were just like, holy shit, that was good. And like making the jokes of like, I kind of don't want to be at the house at all. And like, but I'm going to fall asleep because I don't really care. But I think the scene that got me to be like, I would be out of that fucking house so fast is when they see the footprints coming into the room. I would have been like, hightailing it, like, fuck that. I guess I'm going to move into a church. This is my home now. I don't see the outside world. Like, bye.
Yeah. I completely agree. The footprint scene is great. The big loud bang, and then they go downstairs and the lamp is swinging is my other favorite one. But I also love that it's specifically attached to her. It's not like a haunted house thing that you can really run away from. It's like, she's fucked. And if you care about her, then you're fucked too, because you have no options. If you go to a hotel, you're going to get haunted there. If you go to like whatever.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I would have ran into a church and been like, you have to like lock me in the confessional booth and like bless the shit out of it, I guess. I don't know what we're doing here.
I'm here for an exorcism. Yeah.
Just do it, man. Yeah, paranormal's great. I really like that. Oh man. Well, my number 5 is one that I talk about a lot. I get excited about this movie when it's strictly Halloween. It's not Michael Myers Halloween, but it's strictly like a Halloween film. It takes place on the night of Halloween. I am wearing the shirt. Trick or Treat is just, I will forever love this movie. Michael Gondry is a genius. It started off as a comic book, and then he turned it into a film, and I am still hopeful that he finally makes the sequel to it, because give me more. I'm for it. I need more of Sam in my life. That's this guy. That's Sam. It's such a fun film. It takes Hollywood. It takes Halloween legends and kind of mythology and lore about the holiday itself, and kind of showcases some of it. You know, you've got werewolves, you've got the spooky stuff, you've got ghosts, you've got trick-or-treating, you have the watch your candy, you know, beware of candy. Oh, they've got that kind of stuff throughout the film. It's silly, it's enjoyable, it's just spooky shit comes out on Halloween night. That's always been the myth. And the movie just shows you the spooky shit. And Sam just kind of connects these like 4 or 5 different stories throughout the course of the film. And it's just, I get so happy every time I watch this movie. My daughter always just shakes her head. She's like, you're like a kid when you talk about this. I know, because it's so much fun. It's so much fun. I don't even know where to start with how enjoyable this movie is. All I know is I watched it on a whim. I had seen nothing about it, knew nothing about it years ago. And I came across it, thought, well, this looks dumb and whatever. I'll watch it. And it was another one of those where it was just instantly like, yep, I'm going to love this movie. And here we are, like 14, 15 years later, loving it just as much as I did that first time. It's so enjoyable because it's unique without being, it's hard to explain, but it's a unique kind of feeling of a movie. And it's a very traditional movie for me. I finish every Halloween before I go to bed. I watch Trick or Treat. That's how I finish my Halloween like holiday, which is fitting because that's how the movie it concludes Halloween. So Trick or Treat, it's just too good. It's too good.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that I always see people praise, and they say the same thing, that it is the perfect Halloween movie, the one that you should definitely enjoy and watch regularly if you like Halloween. And I have not seen it yet. It's one of those ones that I know you have loved and I need to watch. It's on the list to get around to.
Yeah, it's silly. It makes no sense half of the time, but that's the brilliance to it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
Yeah,
good.
sounds fun. Uh, my number 5 is kind of a very different, weird movie, but it's one that I've watched in the last year or year and a half, maybe, um, and just loved immediately. And so it's kind of snuck its way quickly up my list for that reason, and all the way up to the middle, which is no small feat by any means. It's another found footage style, but it's the first movie that writer and co-writer and director Patrick Brice has made. Wrote it and stars with Mark Duplass, who I love. So my number 5 is Creep, and Creep 2 also. Both of them go together. Creep is such a perfect movie because of how good Mark Duplass is in it, because
Yeah.
he perfectly disarms you and invites you in. It's about a guy who is a filmographer who just responds to a Craigslist ad, which you shouldn't do, people. Just as a general rule, don't respond to Craigslist ads. But he does. And I mean, this is 2014. People are a little less savvy back then. And he's asked to basically film this guy's essentially like last will and testament. He wants to tell he's dying. He wants to tell his family all these things, and he needs this videographer to like follow him around for a day and film messages for him. But he's you don't really know if he's eccentric or odd or weird or
Mhm.
maybe a little challenged or what his deal is, but he's different for sure. And then things just like he'll like tease something that you're like, that's a red flag. You should not be
Oh
into that.
yeah.
But then he's so good at being like, hey man, hey brother, like it's fine, like, and you believe him. He's like, there's a thing that happens where he has like a mask that he puts on, and it's like a playful thing, but it's a wolf mask, and he very much is the big bad wolf in the sense that he just invites himself in, he dresses as granny, like he gets you to let your guard down when you know
Mhm.
you shouldn't. You are staring at him, he has giant eyes and teeth, and you know that he's a wolf, but he still gets you to believe that everything's okay. And it's so clever. And Creep 2 is just as good. I really enjoy it as well, and it does enough different things that it's worth checking out. So I don't hear it really talked about, and I loved it as soon as I saw it. So definitely check out Creep.
Creep is a very fitting title for that movie. Yeah, I remember when I first watched it. You hadn't told me about it. It was one of those weird movies where like we both ended up watching it, but didn't tell each other about it until a little bit after watching it, and both being like, "Dude, you gotta check this out." I just did. Oh my god! Like
Yeah.
I remember what like affected me the most about Mark Duplass was I had watched him on the show The League. So I
Right.
knew him as that character and I figured this is what this guy does.
Hmm.
Awesome. And then I watched
He's
Creep and was
fun and
like, that is
friendly and
not what
nice.
this guy does. What is happening?
Right.
Um that movie should also just be called like Red Flag because everything he does and says, you are instantly just
Hmm.
like, you should get out of that situation. You should not be here at all. You need to leave. Why aren't you leaving? I remember thinking that throughout the course of the movie is why aren't you gone yet? You
Hmm.
should just be like, right, fuck this. Like, yeah, creeps good stuff. All right, my number 4. So you had brought up like how do you define horror at the start? And you said you had a couple that you felt people would debate.
Hmm.
I could see people trying to debate me on this one. And I'm going to nip that in the butt real quick and just be like, typically, when a movie involves murder or human sacrifice,
Yeah.
it's automatically lumped into a horror genre. But then you include like a supernatural entity that you as the audience member kind of knows who they're actually talking about without saying the normal names that we're used to this fella having,
Mm.
then you definitely get to like, yeah, this is a horror film.
Mhm.
We've talked about this one, I feel, quite a bit in the past couple weeks, especially after last week, or the last episode. But this movie is one that I cannot stop watching it. I get more excited about it every time I watch it. I get happier every time I watch it. I think the acting in it is the absolute incredible. She was my number one final girl. So Ready or Not is my number 4 all-time favorite horror movie. This movie
Yeah.
is just, it did what I think the genre needed, where it gave it something new. It's not a
Mhm.
sequel, it's not a reboot, it's a complete original story that perfectly places comedic things in it without
Mhm.
trying to actually be or making that the focal point.
Mhm.
You laugh when, like, this sounds fucked up, but you laugh when the coked out daughter shoots the maid in the face, but then like a minute later, you are thrown right back into, oh, we're running for our life again, and you're trapped on
Yeah.
this in this mansion uh, with this very manipulative family and a aunt that is out of her goddamn mind and just
Right.
angry about everything.
Yeah, takes everything way too seriously.
But Ready or Not, it is one of the most original and
Mhm.
enjoyable, entertaining horror films we've gotten in so long that it just, like, I almost felt bad for having it this low, and it was
Yeah.
almost way higher, but I just can't deny my top 3.
Mhm.
I just can't deny them. But Ready or Not is just, I
Yeah, and you had her as your number 1 final girl. You definitely have made it clear it's worth the praise, and I completely agree. Even
it
it's not on my
is.
list, but I completely agree. I love Ready or Not, and it's so refreshingly original as one of the main things that I've taken away and love about it. The fact that you
Mhm.
can be watching it and be surprised. You're like, I don't know, is this real or are they crazy or what's going on? And then where it goes, you're just always surprised and in the best way, in ways that make you laugh, and then in ways that you would definitely identify with the character. You're like, this is scary and dangerous. You should get the fuck out of here.
And dude, her screams,
Hmm.
like her screams where she's crawling out of the pit with the nail,
Yeah.
or trying to crawl through the fence where it's like cutting her back open.
Hmm.
That kind of screaming to me is like, this is more
Hmm.
gut wrenching and intense to hear
Hmm.
than every other scream in any horror film
Hmm.
ever made. This is, I
Yeah,
feel her pain.
particularly the one where she makes it through the fence, gets to the road, and the car doesn't stop, and she just lets out this scream where you understand her, like she is so afraid that there's just no way out of this, that
She's
it's
so fed up with
impossible.
absolutely everything and just
Hmm.
she's afraid. She's like truly terrified.
Yeah.
And that guy's a dickhead that just keeps going. So
Yeah.
fuck that driver.
Yeah, I want to see Samara Weaving in so much more stuff because she was very that's the first thing I remember seeing her in, at least mentally.
She's great. She has this movie on Netflix. That was actually the first one I saw her in. Very funny, very enjoyable. It's silly. It's everything you should want. It's called The Babysitter. It's a horror
Oh,
film.
I've seen The Babysitter. I forgot she was in that though.
Yeah, she's good in
Yeah,
that one,
that's a
but
fun
her in
movie.
Ready or Not is just it. That is an unreal on just refreshment for this genre.
Mhm.
So, Ready or Not, so good. It's so good.
It is so good. Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned before, I put the song in my favorite horror songs because it's catchy,
Yeah,
but also it's about how you should run and not get murdered. So a little off-putting.
oh, a little bit, a little bit.
Okay, my number 4 is probably the biggest movie on my list as far as popularity, and certainly of in a list full of a lot of first or second movies that people have made. This is made by the most established filmmaker at the time that he made this. By no surprise, I'm sure that it's not a surprise to you either. My number 4 is Scream, of course. I mentioned before that I didn't see it for a long time, and then saw it probably 10 years ago, and loved it. I was like, I can't believe this is what that movie was. Like, I'd always heard of Scream, but didn't really
Yeah,
know what it was, and and then I immediately fell in love with the meta aspects of it. That
yeah.
it's every movie in the Scream franchise. I feel like Scream is the most consistent franchise ever. I would say John Wick is the most consistent franchise ever, but Scream is close. Scream is definitely close, and I think the thing that makes it work so well is that it's it's so well focused on the time that it came out and what the purpose of each movie is,
Hmm.
because the first movie is focused on horror movies, just a commentary on horror movies. Came out in the mid 90s when horror was kind of struggling. It was all very
Hmm.
kind of basic, had kind of started doing the paint by numbers thing where it's like we've had the originals in the 70s and 80s that kind of changed the game, but now we're kind of stagnant. Scream came out and was like, hey, look at how there are these rules and we need to do all these things and this is how everything works, and was so, I guess, on the nose of understanding what worked and what didn't, and then commented on it and did incredible commentary, but also then was its own scary movie
Right.
about all of this stuff. Um, and I've never really found Scream scary, but I will say, rewatching it after having a kid, the first scene with with when
Drew Barrymore.
not particularly Drew Barrymore getting murdered, but when her parents come home and find that she has not there and her house is broken into, and then pick up the phone and hear her
When they
dying.
listen to her being gutted on
Yeah,
the
I'm like,
phone.
as a parent, I'm like, no. And Christy, particularly, she's like, I love this movie, but also, no, I do not want to listen to this right now. So it's very, 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 very well done. Um, I think that it's not the first movie Wes Craven made, but it is the first movie that Kevin Williamson wrote. And so I think
Mhm.
it kind of keeps my streak going there. Um, Scream is fantastic, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Um, but that original and the first, I don't know, all of the movies, I think I love for their own individual reasons. The
Yeah.
sequel is such a great commentary on sequels, and the requel is a great commentary on requels. Like, they get what they're doing and they do a good job. So Scream is always good.
Yeah. Well, this is funny. We finally have a crossover, and we don't even have to really segue because my number 3 is Scream.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Scream was one that I felt was gonna be on my list because, like you, I mean, I saw it well before you saw it. Uh,
Yeah,
I I saw it when
naturally.
I wasn't really supposed to see it. It was one of those for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I remember just being like, this movie is a blast. Like,
Hmm.
the meta stuff didn't really connect with me, but I really enjoyed watching this killer stumble. Like,
Yeah.
because we've had so many slashers where they're just, you can't trip them up. Ghostface comes along and literally you hear him get hit and he goes, oh shit. Ah, oh. Like,
Right. You kick him in the nuts, it's like, oh my God.
right. But I'm with you. I as much as I was laughing during Scream, there's so many scenes in it and so many moments where you're like, this is legit. Like this is a true slasher film. And that
Yeah.
I really respected that. And then all the meta stuff on top of that was just like, this is all cherry on top. This is like
Mhm.
a giant cake of the best kind of icing consistency. It's not too much icing. It's not too much. Right. This is
Yeah.
like, this is the perfect cake right here.
Yeah, you don't want it
I
to be
love
all
Scream.
icing. You need a good base for sure.
Yeah. And I knew it was going to be on my list. I I found myself watching it several times since what was that? Scream 6 came out earlier in the year. And I
Mhm.
wasn't the biggest fan of Scream 6.
Mhm.
Primarily cuz like you kind of need Sidney Prescott to be a part of it, but
Yeah.
also I personally, and I know I said this back then, I think I've said it a few times, I'm kind of burned out on the requel idea that Hollywood just keeps doing.
Yeah.
I've it's probably residuals of like how betrayed I feel due to the Halloween uh trilogy that we were given.
Yeah.
But just in general, I think it's like you can do other things.
Right.
Regurgitating requel is just it's getting old. Um
My problem with requels is that it's the safest possible thing so far until they
it's
find
very
the
safe.
next. Like it used to be that the reboot was the safe thing. It's like, oh, we'll
Mhm.
just start over this thing. But that was at least more risky because you're at least starting over fresh with
Right.
new characters, new all this stuff, like new actors and all this stuff. The requel is even less risky than that. They're like, let's kind of start over, but mostly keep all the same actors and characters and just kind of keep it going. But then if people like it, we'll start it over with these other characters. It's so like
Right.
wishy-washy, and it's like just do something intentional and new, try it.
Just pick a side and stick with it. Just come on,
Yeah,
man. Just give us something new.
bunch of bitches.
But after that sixth one, like I have rewatched that first Scream a handful of times now this year. And one, some of it was in preparation for the Final Girls episode, and some of it was just because I felt like watching Scream. And then
Hmm.
I watched it again for this. I didn't have to because I had literally just rewatched it for Final Girls.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm going to rewatch it for the top 10 horror because I'm pretty positive I'm having it on the list. I just
Hmm.
don't know where I'm going to put it.
Hmm.
And I thought it'd be funny. I originally was like, I'll put it at number 10 and just be spiteful and be like, I had Sydney at 10. I'm going to put Scream at 10.
Yeah.
And then I rewatched it. And I was just like, every decision that was put into that movie by Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson, everything they did,
Yeah.
I was just like, I, on a movie nerd mentality of just the writing style, the editing, how they pieced this whole story together,
Hmm.
I was like, I think I enjoy this movie way more than I've ever given it credit for. And I think I have a
Hmm.
higher respect for it than I've ever actually given it. And when it ended, I remember I sat there and just let the credits roll and was like, is Scream the perfect horror film? Like, I think this is a valid question to propose.
Yeah.
Is it legit the perfect horror movie possibly ever made? It has every element. It lets you know the element and then shows
Hmm.
you like it.
Yeah, it will explain it to people that don't know just by the
Right.
fact that if they're not yet horror fans, it's like, in case you don't know, this is why we're doing this, and this is
This
why
is a
it's
trope.
great. But
Right.
for those that also are big fans, there's even more other things. It's like
Yeah. And
the
it
fact that
builds
Wes
and
Craven will like it's not just a commentary on horror movies, but it's a commentary on Nightmare on Elm Street and other Wes Craven things.
Right.
And he'll talk about like, oh, Freddy's, not that scary or whatever. Like he'll just does these different things. That's like, I don't know. It's very brilliant, and
There's
it's
a lot to
definitely
Scream,
relatable.
and I was like, I think this movie's going to be like in my top 3. It was just kind of an understanding, but I didn't quite want to put it in top 3.
Mm-hmm.
But then I watched the rest of my list, and as much as all those movies bring me joy, I was like, none of them really hit just that, like, wow, Scream is like perfect. It's just
Mm-hmm.
perfect. They're all super close, but
Mm-hmm.
Scream just hit it on the nail, or hit the nail on the head. So I was like, I guess you're higher. And I find it funny
Mm-hmm.
because we never planned these lists together.
Right.
But I think it's funny that I had Sydney low, you had her very high, and then
Mm-hmm.
I rated Scream higher than you. And
Yeah.
now I'm super curious to find out what your top
Well,
3
you
are.
you rated Sydney low on a technicality because
I
she just
did.
wasn't the last girl. She's
I
a
mean,
final girl with a bunch of other survivors.
she doesn't just have one other. She's got like they have a group that goes into the sequel together, and then
Yeah.
again, and then
Yeah.
again.
It's true. It's true. It's a valid technicality, but also not. Yeah, I get it. But I honestly did have Scream at 3, and then over the course of my tinkering over the last 2 weeks, have just edged it out slightly. I was like, this movie. I think you're right. I do think that it's very. I would not argue if someone said Scream is the perfect horror movie because it is very it does all of the horror things that it needs to well. It's like it has the depth of
Yeah.
horror. Like it takes the horror principles and it does all of them all the way down to the deepest depth very, very well, flawlessly. And it is also very broad because it does the meta stuff, it does the social commentary on what movies are doing now,
Yeah.
what horror storytelling does, what slashers do, um, is his own slasher movie. It does all of those things, and it does a lot of different things, and it does them all very, very well. The movies that I put higher than it are just personally, I like this specific thing, narrow thing, and it does that, and I like that a lot. Like it made me feel things that Scream didn't make me feel because I don't find slashers terribly terrifying, but
Right.
I find these movies uncomfortable or scary or interesting or cerebral or whatever, and
Mhm.
I like that thing a little bit more. So that's the only reason it edged out, but
I hear you.
very, very close. I would not argue anybody
Yeah.
that says it's
Well,
perfect.
I mean, it's my number 3. It's not my number 1. But
Hmm.
my top, the ones that edged it away from that, will be no surprise.
Okay. Okay.
But you're up first.
Um, Mine has at least one not surprise that I have brought up before, but two other movies that I know were not on my previous horror list. So possible surprises, probable surprises. My number 3 is probably a movie that most people have not even heard of. You probably have because you're a weirdo and have heard of every horror movie ever made. But my number 3 is a movie from 2015 called We Are Still Here.
Oh, that's a good movie. That's
It's
a
a
really good
great
movie.
movie. It's from written and directed by Ted Geoghegan. Geoghegan.
You
And
know, it's been
he
a while
has
since we've had a name we can't pronounce, but we really try.
there's like consonants in places there shouldn't be, and I don't really know how you describe it. But he's made a lot of movies and he hasn't never really broken out, but he should. He's definitely like a Ty West type. If you like that style,
Mhm.
you would like this movie. It does very cool things, and it does very cool things that I think are so grounded in reality. They're things that are commonly reported in like hauntings of like hearing footsteps in the hallway when you know nobody's home. The horror movies don't do a lot of those things all the time.
Mhm.
And so it kind of stands out as like, that's a thing that I know, and it does it in a way that I guess makes more sense than a lot of the other things that people do in horror movies. Um, and the thing about We Are Still Here, so it's about an old married couple, and they unfortunately had a son who was college age who died relatively recently, and they decided to move out of the city and into a house in the country. And of course, they get to the house in the country, and certain things start happening, and they start thinking that it's their son spirit trying to communicate with them. But the thing that I love about this movie is particularly it builds very, very slowly. Again, it has a bunch of actors in it that you've never seen before, so you just feel sucked into it.
Mhm.
And when it kicks off, I said this before about The House of the Devil. This movie is even crazier than The House of the Devil because shit starts kicking off, and you think there's like a level of malevolence, and then you start learning things and things start unraveling. And like you've said before, I definitely agree. I really, really enjoy the investigation and the reveal and
Yeah.
mystery of horror movies. This has a lot of that, and things start unraveling, and you're like, there's two different levels of competing evil, and then you're like, no, wait, there's three different three different parallel forces that are trying to kill these people, and it gets really crazy and kind of bloody. Pretty bloody. People will call me out for saying kind of bloody. There's a lot of blood that happens at one point, but it's just so small and simple, and I love the style of it, and the especially the look of the
Mhm.
ghouls, the I don't know what you even call them, but ghouls is a good enough term. The way that they look and their white eyes and burned surfaces, like, you just have to see it. It's so well done. It's one of those movies that I don't know. I've remember seeing a long time ago, and I didn't have it on my list originally, and then I was like searching through my library, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I kind of forgot how much I love this movie." And then I rewatched it. I was like, "I think I liked it. Like, I think I really liked it. I think it connected with me, but I think I confused it with a different movie, the name of it with a different movie." And then I rewatched it, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I was right. And I am a fool for forgetting it because it is really, 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 really good. So had to be all the way up at number 3. We
Yeah.
Are Still Here.
It is a good one. It's been a minute since I watched that one.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, so I had the day off today, and I was just kind of wandering around. It's spooky season, so I was looking at
Mm-hmm.
like what spooky movies don't I have right now that I should probably like maybe pick up, or at
Yeah.
least go home and like, oh, is it streaming? I'll go home and watch. And I saw We Are Still Here and was like, I need to rewatch that one because I saw
Mm-hmm.
that a long time ago and it was great.
Yeah.
And no one knows about it, but it was great. And I was like, I always get that one for some reason. My brain, they're nothing alike. But We Are Still Here and Homebound, for some reason, my brain is always like, those two go hand in hand. And it's like, they really
Oh,
don't
yeah. Yeah,
at
I could see
all.
that. I could see that because it has Homebound is the one with like the person in the sheet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I could definitely see that. It has that same, the titles alone have that same sort of
It
vibe.
it just for some reason, yeah, for some, maybe that's what it is, the vibe of it. But they're
Mhm.
very different movies. Um, but yeah, so that's funny that it's on your list. And literally
Serendipity.
5 hours ago, I was just looking at it, going, "Do I want to buy it? No, I'll see if it's streaming."
That's
Oh man,
amazing.
that's a good pick, man. That's a good pick. All
Yeah, I
right.
was proud of that one.
Well, my number two, I feel like this is one that you've probably been wondering if it would retain a spot just due to how bitter I am now and betrayed I still feel, will forever feel. I truly feel that the travesty and betrayal of David Gordon Green to Michael Myers is so much worse than the Star Wars prequels. Like, those, to me, have nothing on what he did to this franchise. And I know you brought up the question during the Final Girls episode of, you were wondering, would Laurie Strode even be on that list, just due to the fact. I was like, of course, I've got to have Laurie. I thought long and hard about, do I punish the original Halloween for the bullshit that we got in the last couple of years? And part of me wanted to. Part of me wanted to be like, man, I can't do it anymore. But that original Halloween and Michael Myers, the original Michael Myers, like, they have such a strong foothold in my love for the genre. And that movie, John Carpenter did so much for, like, really building me out of a place of fear, which is kind of ironic that Michael Myers is part of that formula to get me from not being afraid, because I still think he's like the scariest slasher ever put on film.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I rewatched it and was like, thank God I still cherish this movie so much. And I cherish the OG Michael Myers. There's no, like, he stays strong at as my number 2. Like, that first one is so well written. It's so well made. And it's not scary, but it's so intense. And my daughter was asking me, what is it about Michael Myers that's just like makes him so intense? And I told her, he doesn't make a sound. Like, you'll hear him breathe and he grunts one time, but the rest of the film, when he kills, he's silent. All the grunting, all the sounds you're hearing, it's coming from his victims. And he doesn't just stab everybody. I was like, he kills everyone kind of a different way. He does a lot of strangling in that first one. She was like, oh, that's jacked up. And I was like, and you can't see his eyes. So it's just black pits. So it's like soulless. There's featureless, he's wearing a mask. And she was just like, yeah, she was just kind of like, oh, that's actually really scary. I was like, I know.
He's like an unstoppable force that just needs to kill, and he'll do it any way he can.
Yeah, he sets his eyes on his targets, and that's just what he's doing. But yeah, that original Halloween is just, to me, it just means too much to me personally for me to try and punish it for the travesty that we were given. So I love that original. It's not going anywhere. And like I said earlier, if A24 or any other studio wins the bid on owning the franchise to take over it, obviously they're going to try to reboot it again. That's going to happen. I just hope that they treat it as a genuine reboot. If they're going to do it, reboot it.
Yeah.
Start over. Start fresh. I would trust A24 more. I feel the writers they tend to hire have more sense of patience with storytelling. So I feel they would be able to stick with, because that's like the most effective part about that original Halloween is how patient that movie is.
Yeah.
Michael is just, he's in the background. He drives a car in the first one. A lot of people forget that. He's legit driving around in the first movie. Like, but you got to be patient with it. And I think that's where a big problem with all the sequels came about, was they all lost patience. Because everyone was like, let's just get to the kills. And it's like, but the kills aren't nearly as intense as the anticipation.
Right. The
anticipation is what makes it. Yeah. When he's like staring Laurie down from the street, you're like, it's 2023. Seeing that's freaky. Like, that's uncomfortable.
Right. Right. I think no matter what year it is, if you're used to people kind of doing their own thing, going about their business, not really making eye contact, like looking down or whatever. If there's a dude in the distance by a hedge just staring at you, you're gonna feel uncomfortable.
You're gonna be like watching your six a little bit extra, like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah, you should for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the way you
it
describe
retains.
Halloween makes me laugh because it's exactly my experience with Star Wars that I'm like it makes you examine and then for a while you're like, I'm not really a fan of this because I don't want to go through all the hassle of saying I like it, but I don't like the new stuff and I don't like this. And it's
Yeah.
just too complicated. And so you just kind of cut it out. And then you go back to the beginning, rewatch them, and you're like, no, I genuinely love this. And they can't take it away from me.
Right.
Yeah, I get it. I get where you're at.
Yep. Yep.
And you're right. That's a great movie. My number two is also one that I've praised forever and probably the most anticipated one on my list. No surprise to you. I know that you like it as well. My number two is The Strangers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. I remember as what it's in the first handful of movies that I remember buying on DVD because I saw it and was just like instantly, I guess, more afraid of it. Granted, I grew up at a house like kind of in the woods, kind of like this house. Like it was kind of away from city limits and stuff. So it's kind of set in a place that I'm familiar with. And then I watched it. I for some reason choose to watch this movie, particularly when I like move into a new house or go on vacation somewhere. Like when I moved out of my parents' house into like my first apartment, I watched this movie before my roommates moved in. I was like there alone, and I was like, that's not the best idea. But The Strangers is so effective because it's it it chooses not to do all of the things that you expect it to do. And when, like, most of the time when you watch a movie and something scary happens, the movie wants you to know desperately that something scary just happened, and there'll be like a sharp violin sting that happens in the
Yeah.
music or whatever, and it's like, hey, look at this thing that just like kind of popped in. Even if you're not watching, you're like, oh, I can tell just from the audio that something important happened. The Strangers is the exact opposite, where you'll be watching a movie and it's this sweet story, or not a sweet story, but it's a story about this couple who had a fight and they're maybe breaking up and you don't really know what's going on. And then someone knocks on the door and they ask for Tamara, and Tamara's not there. And so they send her away. Um, and then things start happening and they're not really sure what's going on. And there's noises and tapping and things and and then there'll be shots where my favorite scene in the whole movie is the scene where Liv Tyler is just like in the living room and she's just doing stuff, walking over to like get some stuff from the kitchen, and there's no indication that something happened, but there's a figure in the background, blurry,
Yeah.
standing there. And you don't know how he got in. You don't know how long he's been there. You're like, has he been there the whole time? And I just wasn't paying attention. And then as soon as he showed up, he's gone. And it's just so subtle and quick and quiet that is the most off-putting, that you feel like they can come and go as they please. You're at their
Mhm.
mercy, and there are these strangers out there who are just toying with you, toying with this couple. And the villains are the best because there's no like huge story or vengeance
Yeah.
or monster or anything. It's just that I don't know. I think it connects to one of my favorite things is how shitty people are. Like, there are a lot of these movies that are on my list, and there's a big supernatural element to it, or there's a monster or a ghost or a demon or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's often not the worst part. It's that there's also these people, and they're mostly the problem because they are
They're just bad.
perpetuating it or worshiping it or whatever and causing all the problems. Um, this movie is kind of like that because the they're just bad people. They want to
Mm-hmm.
kill you just because you answered the door. Like, you were home and that's
Yeah.
why we're going to kill you. And that's fucked up. And that's why I like it in a weird way.
I always feel validated when I hear other people say they like a horror film because it's fucked up. And I'm like, you get it. Yes.
Yeah, I get it. I get it, at least with this movie for sure. I don't really care for the sequel, which is one of the rare cases on
I
this
was gonna say
list.
we don't gotta mention the sequel because that movie sucks so
I'm
bad.
very concerned because they're making a reboot, like a
Yeah.
three-part trilogy next year. And I just found out this week that all three movies are going to come out next year, which is interesting. But also, I'm still concerned that they're going to fuck it up or
I'd be
do too
concerned
much.
because they're probably gonna try and like make it super exciting, like constant things
Mhm.
happening, and we'll have another big fight in a swimming pool that makes no sense, and we're gonna God, that sequel's so bad.
Yeah, the sequel's not good. The first
Yeah.
one, in addition to this scene where the guy just shows up in the background, I just remember, and I always feel this way when I watch it, the fact that they have their blinds drawn on the windows, and you
Yeah.
feel like that should be protective, but also they need to look outside to know what, if they're out there or not, or what's going on. And the like build up to, do I go up to the window? Do I open the up? And it, when I open it up, is there going to be something like a guy standing right there or whatever?
Right.
That tension, I don't know what it is about this movie, but they do it so well that you're like, you need to look outside, but you shouldn't look outside. And then you don't know what's going to happen when they do look outside. Like, I don't know what it is or how they do it, but they do such a good job, and I haven't found any other movie that does it like this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, The Strangers is very well done.
Mhm.
Um, it, I think my favorite thing about it is it doesn't rely on the gore. It doesn't rely on showing a full torture scene. It doesn't rely on these kind of aspects of the genre that movies like this would typically want to really lean into.
Mhm.
The Strangers is very like it's an hour and a half long movie, and for about an hour, it's background movement or creepy girl at the door,
Mhm.
sounds, a phone is moved, or it's just little
Yeah.
things like that. Walking up to the window because you're like, what's happening outside?
Mhm.
Um, every time I watch it, though, every time I watch it, when he leaves and she's just sitting in the house by herself, every time I'm like, what a dick.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Don't do
who
that.
does that? Go sleep on the couch if you're having a fight. Like, who does? You don't. Oh, it's like 1 a.m. You know what? I'm gonna bail on you at the moment because I just need to get a break. Shut the fuck up. Go sit in the living room.
Yeah. Yeah. Words of wisdom.
That might also just be because like I know the movie, and so you're constantly like, you don't. You're stronger in numbers, or you're
Right.
supposed to be stronger in numbers.
Right.
That's a great pick. I had a feeling you would have it on because I've always known how much you love that movie. And
Mhm.
as we were making it through the list, I was like, he hasn't mentioned it yet. He hasn't mentioned it. That one's got to be up there then.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good Jake pick. That's a good one. All right, my number one favorite horror film for so many reasons. Evil Dead, the original Evil Dead, is just, to me, it is so much fun. It's so gross. There's not one moment of this movie which really, when you watch it, it should probably be like just ripped apart because it's so poorly made. It's so cheaply made, and you can tell. But all of
Mhm.
that is what I love so much about this movie. And I know we've talked about it several times of just my respect for Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and their team and their friends just kind of sticking through it and making sure they get this film made because they just wanted to. They wanted to make this film. They wanted to do something together, and so they did it. And it's an effective film. It's really like
Mhm.
the Godfather of cult classics. And it's just like it is up there. But that first Evil Dead, for as silly as it is and like over the
Mhm.
top, the gore scenes in that movie are legit. The close-up shot of like one of the characters takes a, his ankle gets ripped apart, his leg gets torn apart, and it's like a close-up shot of the flesh. You feel that
Mhm.
when the
Mhm.
deadites are like singing in the middle of the hallway. It, it's a little creepy. The movie is just pure fun to me. It is the most joyful horror film. I love every second of it. It it's been my favorite since my cousin introduced me to it long ago, where he was just like, yeah, I was really starting to get into this genre and just no longer being afraid of stuff. And he just sat me down and he just put the movie in. I didn't have a
Mhm.
choice. It was just, you've never seen it, you're watching it. So we watched it, and it was instantly, I was laughing, I was grossed out. It was like, where is this movie gonna go? They're, reading the Book of the Dead, and the Necronomicon is. I love the original
Mhm.
Evil Dead. I've got Ash like everywhere in here in my place. He's
Oh.
and I've told my daughter, like, someday I will sit you down and we will watch Evil Dead. There will be a scene though where I'm fast forwarding or forcing you to leave the room because she doesn't need to see a tree do despicable acts. Um,
Yeah, that
no
tree
one needs
scene
to
is
see that,
definitely
but that
special.
tree scene is memorable. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, that it's just, it clicked on me, and I think Evil Dead was the first time I really understood just how all encompassing horror really is and can be, where it can
Mhm.
just take elements of everything and be like, we can throw it all into this one story and just make it crazy. And you don't need to worry about everything making sense in a horror film. You don't need to have every little thing explained or connected. You can have stuff where you're like, I still don't get why that happened, but it's okay. Like, it's just Evil Dead is just it's just the best. It's just the best. I love Evil Dead.
Yeah, I know you do, and I am not surprised that it's all the way at the top. Um, Ash as a hero and the whole that cult classic and how it's grown over the years, I think
Yeah,
speaks for itself as how much people love it and how great it is. It's very, very good. I like it too.
it's so good. It's so good. Makes me
Okay,
happy every time.
my number one is very different. It's very much not a mainstream title or franchise or has any big characters that anybody knows about, which is probably a weird thing about me. But this movie, I think about a lot. It has stuck with me for a very long time. I didn't even have it on my previous top 10 horror movie. I think I had it as honorable mention. Um, but it's stayed with me forever. It's not a big success because it's a Netflix original movie, which is weird, not a theatrical release at all. Um, and so my number one is The Ritual from 2017. first solo feature from David Bruckner, who mostly is known for his segments in like the VHS and South Band
Hmm.
anthologies. Um, the Ritual is special to me because partly for the story and mostly for the the arc of the characters, and then I feel like the production design is so effective because it's about this group of friends that are planning a trip to hang out together, and they're debating if where they should go, and then one of their friends ends up dying, which is an important part of the story, so I won't go into it. um, but they're all kind of decide to go on a trip to honor him, and then also haunted a little bit by that event and their choices in
Hmm.
it. And then so they go on a hiking trip in Sweden, like northern Sweden, like forests, nowhere Sweden. And during that hiking trip, encounter a forest, very, very dark, disturbing things that happen in the forest. And the things that I like about it is I really enjoy, I guess, the mythology of it and how the darkest, scariest things are the oldest stories. And
Yeah.
these ancient deities or gods or whatever myths in the forest can, if you treat them as real as far as in a horror movie, it always, I think, is pretty effective because there's something in the root of human experience or human
Hmm.
history, I think, that you kind of identify with. uh, and the Ritual is great because if if you've ever been camping, you've been in the forest, you've been whatever at night, and you've shined a flashlight out to because you heard a noise, a tree branch snap or something like that, you've experienced when it's so dark out that your flashlight isn't really lighting up anything, and you're shining it and you
Yeah.
can't, it's like the darkness is eating the light from your flashlight. um, this movie does kind of things like that. um, and I also, it reminds me of like when we did that episode about the empty man. There's kind of
Yep.
similar things as far as effigies or mysterious pagan symbols and things that happen. Um, I am scared or affected or whatever by things that happen. Like if an evil is able to like control your mind or make you think certain things or have dreams of certain things or manipulate you to end up in a place and you don't know how you got there because you weren't in control of your body. Um, this movie does things like that a lot, which is very intense. So the Ritual is great, because it's scary to me, but also because the journey of the character is so deep and intentional.
Oh yeah.
This guy who feels like he knows that he was a coward in a serious situation, and then but he doesn't want his friends to think that, and then also he needs to continually fight that, try to make up for
Hmm.
that, try to improve upon that, and choose to not be a coward going forward. I think is really, really good. And I mentioned before, the production design is so effective because there's a perfect melding of this ancient earthy forest and trees and moss and all this stuff, and this thing chasing them through the forest, and then also fluorescent lights and a liquor store and all of the things that they're
Right.
also haunted by in their past. It's all kind of melded together in such an effective and beautiful way that the design of that and how the lighting of the fluorescent lights cast on the forest floor, it doesn't make any sense, but it flows like a dream. It makes a lot of sense. um, I love this movie and nobody ever talks about it. So if I couldn't have Hereditary, because you wouldn't let me. I'm going to choose The Ritual as my favorite horror movie.
I think it's fair, and it's a great choice. Yeah, The Ritual is effective. I remember, I think I read the book first
Okay.
and then saw that they made the movie and was like very excited for the movie. And like every adaptation, yeah, the movie took out some of the stuff from the book that I personally felt were more intense and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember watching the movie and just thinking, like, they did really well because there's parts in that book that, like, would have been, they already adapted very difficult parts of it. Um, but like the last act, there's moments in that last act that I feel would just be very difficult to pull off. So it kind of made sense why they would like shorten
Mm-hmm.
stuff up or switch things around a bit. But both the book and the movie, I remember just being like, this is good writing. And now that author has like 4 or 5 books out. I've read 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
I just read one of his that, dude, I think The Empty Man kind of fucked me up. Um, don't worry, it still segues to The Ritual. I've never done well with cult shit ever, and I read one of this dude's other books just a couple months ago, and it's all about this cult. This guy's going around. He's videographer, documentarian, right? And he's making
Mm-hmm.
this documentary about this cult that's like dead and gone, but he's making this documentary about it, and because he gets hired to do it. And I was
Mm-hmm.
reading the book and I was just like, what the fuck? Because I was thinking of The Ritual and I was thinking
Uh-huh.
of like Hereditary and The Empty Man and just being like, I don't do well with cults. Why
Mm-hmm.
am I putting myself in this shit? And when I finished the book, there were definitely times reading the book, I was like, this is gross. Why am I still reading it? But like, this is a good book, so I'm going to keep reading it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do well with that shit. But The Ritual was deeply disturbing to me, especially in the final like third of that story. And it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be deeply disturbing and deeply just effective. I would not do well in that situation. I know that for a fact. I at all. At all.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those movies that I love so much I would be interested in reading the book, and I don't read that many books.
Yeah.
But I do think that if Adam Neville's novel is anything like this movie, then I think it would be great or even better. Um, yeah,
Yeah, there's some crazy shit in that book.
the choices of the people and the aspects of it that you alluded to,
Mm-hmm.
the cult or worshiping of this forest deity or whatever it is dark and effective, but then just the thing and how it looks and how it behaves and what it does, I guess its intelligence is incredible. I
Yeah.
knew that The Empty Man fucked you up when uh, I think you hadn't seen it before when we watched it for the episode where we talked about the whole
Yeah.
movie. We did a whole episode about The Empty Man, which people haven't seen, from 2020. Um, like 6 months ago, like a year and a half later after we did that episode or whatever, you text me, you're like, hey, do you have The Empty Man? Because I kind of want to watch it again.
Can you
I
send
was
it
like,
to me?
oh, he liked it.
I did. I told you I had liked it when we did the deep dive into it because that was the first
Yeah.
time I'd seen it and it fucked me up. Um, I've watched it a few times. It's now streaming on Hulu or Netflix. It's on one of the stream sites now.
Yeah.
And it's actually streaming well. It doesn't have like the huge stream numbers, but it's doing well enough where it's starting to show up on more stream sites more
Hmm.
regularly, that I've noticed. So I watched it again.
I think we
Um,
talked about in that episode that
yeah,
it
I don't do well with
very
cults.
likely could be a new cult classic, and so I'm not surprised if it's
It
heading that
needs to
way.
be. The Empty Man deserves a huge audience. It's such a good movie. It's such a good movie. Oh, fucking Empty Man. Well, that's our list, guys. I would say I feel kind of weird about mine because I feel mine was super predictable for the most part, and I feel kind of bad about that, but not really because I love my movies on my
Yeah.
list. Um, Jake, your list was a bit different than what I was expecting for some of it. Like I had a good feeling about a handful of yours, but
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, I did admittedly cheat a little because I didn't have Hereditary, which was an obvious one, or As Above, So Below, which is an obvious
mhm.
one, or I had other, I feel, probably obvious ones like Cabin in the Woods, which we both obviously love.
Right.
But I did think that Cabin in the Woods is a lot like Scream in that it's great for its meta nature, really fun, not really scary.
Hmm.
So for a lot of those, I kind of left them off and
Yeah,
chose
yeah.
more horrific, hoary. That's not a word. Horror-ish movies that I felt deserved the spotlight.
Well, what honorable mentions would you toss out there then?
On the topic of cults that you hate, um, I would have to say I really, really wanted to try to fit The Invitation on.
Dude,
The
that movie, okay,
Invitation,
I don't get scared, but The Invitation is
yeah.
no, no, no. Great movie, but no. Like not
Yeah.
even a little bit
It's
no.
like The Invitation is one of those movies that has stuck with me so much, like The Ritual, like these other ones. So I put it way up there. Um, it's like if you were invited over to somebody's house for a nice dinner, and then it would be bad enough if they were like pitching you a mid level marketing scheme or something like that. But instead of that, it's actually a cult that they want you to
Yeah.
join.
Yeah, The
Uh,
Invitation is
it's
that
great.
movie. I watched that movie once. And when the
That's
end
all it took.
credits rolled, I was that was one of those movies where I was like off the couch, like gross, gross on every level. Nope. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it so much mostly for the ending. That the ending
Yeah.
just explodes the scope of it and I'm like, "Oh my god, I love this." So,
Yeah.
highly recommend The Invitation. I really love The Crazies. The
Yeah.
original George Romero crazy The Crazies is really, really good. Shockingly good for as early as it was. And then the remake I really like as well. I
Mhm.
think the remake of The Crazies is also really good. And then 28 Days Later, of course,
Yeah.
which I think I've praised before. That movie is a classic, and I love it every time. Another one that's not talked about a lot, but I just remember being creeped out by significantly, is Session 9.
Dude, that's a great movie. Like
It's a
no one
great
knows about
movie.
Session 9, but Session
Yeah.
9 is legit. That's one of my honorable mentions. That movie's
Oh,
great.
nice. Yeah, it's one of those I really like I like ghost adventures. I like these reality shows where they do like ghost
Yeah.
hunting at like places like and this is at like a sanatorium, like a
They
mental health
filmed the movie
facility.
at the sanatorium. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the
And
real
it's about
place.
these guys that are just like doing construction there, but then find these old tapes and start playing them back of like these patients there. And it's very creepy and very, very good.
Mhm.
Um, and then I would say my last honorable mention is Green Room, which is a kind of a different kind of scary, but about this punk band that ends up playing a Nazi punk bar
Yeah.
and getting trapped there.
That movie's
It's
intense.
scary. Yeah.
It took me a while to watch that one, not through hesitation or anything. It was one of those where it was like, I gotta watch this movie.
Yeah.
And then I kept finding other movies to watch. Um, but Green Room that's an intense movie. I could see people arguing that one not being horror and just
Yeah.
more of like the thriller drama side. Um, but Nazis are terrifying.
Yeah.
And
And I think just the hopelessness of the situation that you're like, there's no way we can get out of here alive.
yeah,
That's horrifying.
That's up there. Green Room's effective. That's an
Yeah.
effective movie. Well, like I said at the start, my list of honorable mentions is far too long to just go and list every single one. So
Mhm.
I will try to narrow things down just a bit.
A skosh.
Yeah. I feel like Dog Soldiers needs a wider audience. That it for
Yeah.
werewolves, that movie is so cool. It's so well
Mhm.
done. The effects are great. The look of the werewolves is awesome. They're huge. Uh, and it's kind of
Mhm.
intense. It has its intense moments. The kitchen scene is awesome. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that one deserves a bigger audience. Um, I kind of found myself recently like kind of wanting to take a step back from I know the extra cerebral or the elevated horror is the new huge thing, and I'm a
Yeah.
fan of a lot of it. But I found
Mhm.
myself kind of erring on a side of caution with it
Mhm.
because I feel that the farther we go into elevated horror, the
Mhm.
quicker we become very pretentious with the genre, and the genre
Mhm.
should never be pretentious.
Yeah.
I think we need movies that are easily picked apart and kind of silly and like, okay, whatever,
Mhm.
because that kind of helps ground the genre back, right? Like gives
Mhm.
us some equilibrium. So it's called Lights Out. I'm definitely going to give that movie credit. Lights Out is a blast. It's
Yeah.
interesting, it's weird, but it's well made. It is not elevated horror. It is just straight haunting kind of style film with a little bit of a twist to that. Um, and then I'm going to throw a sequel out that I am like, this movie deserves way more credit than it ever gets, but it is a highlight in this franchise. Annabelle Creation is a legit movie. Like, that is a legit
Oh, really?
horror film.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
I
haven't
think
watched
it
all of
is
the, like, Conjuring verse Annabelle movies. I've
right.
watched
Really,
the main ones.
honestly, the only two you really should stick with is the first
Mhm.
Conjuring, and then oddly enough, the prequel Annabelle Creation. Creation
Okay.
does awesome tricks. It does a lot of fun little things. Um, and it has a few surprises in it, which I really respected. And I feel the fact that it's a sequel in this big Conjuring universe, it got kind of like shit on and just, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
But it is far superior than the vast majority of that franchise. And
Okay.
then I brought it up during the Final Girls episode. I'm bringing it up again because I realized it is. You know how you got obsessed with Yellowstone when you watched that for the first time, and like every
Yes.
episode, you were like, "Well, I rewatched Yellowstone again because it's just so good," right?
I've watched the series, like, 4 or 5 times, yeah.
Right. I I have found my Yellowstone.
Okay.
Terrifier 2. I am fucking obsessed with this movie, Jake.
You
I
just saw it last episode.
dude, I have watched that movie like 5 times now.
Oh my god. Okay.
I can't stop watching it. I found myself kind of at a place where I was like, okay, I'm pretty set on my notes for the guest spots that we got coming up. I was like, I have like some gaps where I don't have to rush right into the next prep. And I was like, so let's just
Mhm.
grab another movie and let's just watch another movie. I'm looking at everything, scrolling. I'm like, no, I'm watching Terrifier 2 again. Like, no, I'm obsessed with this movie, dude. It's,
Is it
I know
just
why.
Terrifier 2, or is it help that you watched All
It
Hallows
helped
Eve
that I
and
watched the others,
Terrifier
but
1?
Terrifier 2 specifically, and I don't think it relies on the others. They're
Mhm.
just fun to watch just to have the extra context. But Terrifier 2, legit, like it, man, it sparked this whole love, like Ready or Not did for me. It ignited. I've been like excited because it has every aspect of the genre that I love, and it's all jam packed in this 2.5 hour. Just what the fuck am I watching movie? It's so good. It's so good. I haven't been this excited about a horror film in a very long time. And they're re-releasing it in the theaters in November with the trailer for the third one. And I was like, legit, I went to work and legit was telling coworkers like, oh my God, Terrifier 2 is like going to get released with the trailer for the third one. I can't fucking wait. Like, dude, it's crazy to me. Cause when I heard awesome. All the hype on it earlier in the year, I mocked it. I was like, I bet this movie is just trash. And here I am, like, I can't get this movie out of my head. I just can't get it out of my head. It's so good. It's unreal how good this movie is. At least to me, it's that good. But I promise I will not like go full Yellowstone about it with you, where it's every episode I bring it up.
It's a safe space. I mean, if you want to, feel free. So I'm still going to talk about Yellowstone.
Let me put it this way. I could barely sleep after that first time watching it because I was so happy and so excited that I was just like, oh my God, like someone got it. And it's this like super indie guy who did this all on his own. This is just so amazing. And Art the Clown is effective, by the way. He's effective.
Okay.
Oh, it's so good.
That's
it's
awesome.
So
Man, I love getting movie recommendations, and I feel like I have a lot of homework coming out of this episode because I need to see Terrifier 2. I need to see Annabelle Creation. I need to see Trick or Treat. I need to see A Nightmare on Elm Street.
You should watch Dead Silence because that movie, it's like Dead Silence is just, it got shit on a lot when it came out, but it is unique. It's fun. It does a lot of stuff that you recognize, but it does it in kind of unique ways, and just it's a good time. It's a good time.
I like good times. I'm here for it.
Yeah. So tell us your guys' favorite horror movies, what your go-tos are during the spooky season. We want to hear about it. If you think we're crazy for some of our picks, you can let us know. We'll probably laugh at you,
or if you have
wrong.
If you have a new crazy horror movie that you think will finally scare Dustin because he's never been scared before, or that I would like because I like being scared of things, let us know that as well.
Yeah. Send me challenges. As long as we'll keep it within like limited.
Because you're gonna get challenges, and they're gonna be like, "Oh my God, did you see some movie that you think is so mundane and dumb and boring?" And they're like, and it's like gonna be like a big mainstream movie. Like, no, obviously I've seen it, and it's not that scary. That's gonna be the
People
answer
are gonna
from
try and tell me that The Nun 2 was scary, and I'm gonna be like, no, that movie was trash.
Right. He might shit on it, but we still want you to let us know, because there's always that gem out there.
There is.
The Empty Man.
Yeah. The Empty Man's so good. Go find The Empty Man. It's streaming again. I can't remember where it's on or what it's on, but find it, watch it. It deserves the audience.
Google knows.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
Do the subscribe to our channel. It helps everything out. Comment, like, do all that good stuff. Right? Did I say all that correct? Yeah.
You said words that sounded like they should fit there, so that makes sense to me. Yeah, we're doing John Carpenter next week. Check out our guest episodes, and I think that's about it.
I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you, and enjoy the movies.
We'll see you next time.